In Igabukuro, Tokyo, which was known as a wonderful city, 3 children were playing rock, paper, scissors in a park. The city was filled with towering buildings. Chimneys stood alongside massive skyscrapers, stretching as far as the eye could see. The 3 children consisted of twin brothers and their childhood friend, Michiru. The protagonist had been born 5 minutes earlier than his twin brother, and because of that small difference, he often claimed the authority of being the older brother and prided himself on winning everything. The 3 of them got along well, and even after they grew tired from playing, he continued teasing his brother about those 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Michiru sat nearby, quietly reading an adventure novel. 7 years later, on the morning of May 16, 2018, at 7:50 a.m., Shiroaya Yuto called out to his brother, the protagonist Shiroaya Yamato, and wondered which club Yamato was planning to join. 2 other friends were present with them. Yamato wondered why Yuto had suddenly asked about club activities. Yuto explained that he had decided to join the soccer team since he had played in middle school, although he had not found much challenge there. He added that whenever Yamato decided which club to join, he should inform him, as he wanted to compete against him. Yamato felt uneasy and apologized before stating that he would not be joining any club. Yuto was shocked and asked for the reason. However, Yamato ignored the question and told Takafumi and Shinji that they should get going. Yamato reflected that he was not like Yuto. Yuto was exceptionally skilled at soccer, and everyone was amazed by his performance. Once, when Yamato, Takafumi, and Shinji were watching a match, Shinji praised Yuto's skills and even criticized Yamato. Yamato told Shinji, whom he called by the nickname Carrot, to be quiet. However, Shinji continued praising Yuto's performance. Takafumi added that Yamato should feel proud of having such a talented older brother. Yamato blamed himself inwardly, thinking that Yuto was not only better at sports, but also academically superior, as his exam grades were much higher. This made Yamato realize that he could no longer compete with him. Furthermore, Yuto was extremely popular among everyone. Just then, a boy named Yuminori, who was in the same class, called out to Yamato. The others looked at Yuminori, thinking that he was the hard-headed person whose nickname was Yuminori. Yuminori asked Yamato whether he had finally decided to join the soccer team and added that if he did, then together with Yuminori and Yuto, they would become an unstoppable trio. Yamato merely scoffed and turned to leave, apologizing briefly and saying that he was busy playing video game. Takafumi and Shinji followed him, though Takafumi curiously asked about the strange smell. Yamato replied that Yuminori smelled unpleasant because he was the type of person who judged others and looked down on them. Since Yamato and Yuto were twins, people constantly compared them, which frustrated Yamato deeply because his younger brother was better than him in almost everything. During the match, Yuto waved at Yamato, and Yamato waved back thinking that Yuto was trying to act cool despite being 5 minutes younger. To Yamato, Yuminori was merely a follower, always trailing behind Yuto, who stood confidently at the front. Compared to Yuto, Yamato felt painfully inferior. After returning home, Yamato was welcomed by his childhood friend Michiru, who informed him that she was currently cooking. Surprised to see her, Yamato learned from her that his parents were away on a business trip and had entrusted the cooking to her. Yamato remarked that she was truly kind to him. He then noticed the table covered with books and thought that she was once again studying difficult material, which was unsurprising for someone who had ranked first in the middle school mock examinations. When she served the food, Yamato complimented her, saying that it looked delicious as always. He added that her father and sister must be very proud and happy. However, she responded modestly that it might be so. Yamato felt slightly annoyed when he noticed that she was eating while reading a book, and he asked her not to do that. Michiru replied that cooking was like any other skill and explained that she could obtain any information she wished to learn. She went on to mention several academic subjects she had studied with ease. Yamato, feeling slightly overwhelmed, remarked that geniuses like her existed on an entirely different level. He added that she would probably never hear him speak about books unless they were manga, since that was the only type of reading he truly enjoyed. He especially loved shonen manga magazines. To his surprise, Michiru revealed that she also enjoyed reading manga. Sahil stopped eating, stunned to hear such an unexpected confession from her. At that moment, Yuto arrived home and expressed surprise that they had already started dinner without him. Michiru welcomed him warmly and said that she hoped he would enjoy the meal. Yuto then sat down to eat with them. As Yamato watched the two of them together, he reflected that they always seemed perfectly matched. Yuto, who could excel at almost anything, and Michiru, a teenage genius who seemed to grow smarter every day. In contrast, he saw himself as nothing more than an ordinary student with no remarkable talent, someone who was leagues behind both of them. Gathering his thoughts, Yamato told them that they should consider enrolling in a better school for the sake of their futures. However, both of them declined firmly. Yuto responded that he did not mind which high school they attended as long as Yamato and Michiru were with him. He added that their company mattered more than the school itself. Michiru agreed, saying that she felt the same way. Hearing this, Yamato reflected on how, over time, He had begun to feel like a background character in their lives. Yet despite that feeling, he was content. He loved them deeply and believed that as long as the three of them stayed together, he would be happy if those peaceful days continued unchanged. He felt genuinely happy as he looked at Yuto and Michiru, thinking that a certain sweetness always filled the air whenever the three of them were together. Later that night, after everyone had finished their work, it was time for Michiru to leave. Yuto walked her to the door, thanked her for the meal, and asked whether he should walk her home. She replied that it was unnecessary since her house was nearby. Yuto yawned and turned back inside. Just then, Michiru called out to him as if she wanted to say something. However, he could not quite hear her and wondered whether she had spoken at all. She quickly denied it, wished him good night, and left. On May 17, 2018, at 4:08 p.m., while Yamato was walking down the street, a man sitting nearby called out to him and asked whether he wanted to know about his future. Yamato wondered if the man was speaking to him and questioned what he meant. The man, dressed in an overcoat, repeated the question. Curiosity stirred within Yamato. The stranger took out a green bracelet and suggested that if Yamato was truly interested, he should try it. Yamato hesitated, suspecting that the man might be attempting to sell him something expensive. He apologized and said that he did not have time, though he admitted that the bracelet looked striking and unusual. Glancing at the time, he noticed it was already 4:10 p.m. and worried that he might miss the return of his show. The man then told him that he would not obtain the future he desired unless he faced it bravely. Hearing this, Yamato imagined a future where Yuto and Michiru were married, believing that they would remain close and that the three of them would always stay connected. However, doubt crept in as he wondered whether their bond would truly remain the same or whether he would eventually be left behind as the other two grew closer. The man assured him that no payment was required and asked what he intended to do. Though hesitant, Yamato asked whether all he needed to do was wear the bracelet. The man confirmed and instructed him to recite a simple phrase. He explained that the bracelet did not merely allow someone to see the future, but enabled them to travel there once and then return to the present. He called this ability a time leap. Yamato recalled Michiru once mentioning that time machines were a common trope in science fiction, but impossible with modern technology. According to the theory of relativity, she had explained, traveling to the future was theoretically possible, but traveling to the past was not. The man then warned him that the next part was important. Yamato would not know exactly where in the future he would arrive, nor would he be able to choose the specific time. Startled, Yamato said that none of it made sense and questioned what the man was even talking about. The man replied that Yamato could arrive years or even decades into the future, but he would reach the time he desired the most. He then instructed Yamato to chant the words Ultimu Veritas Tempus. He explained that once the phrase was spoken, Yamato would be sent to the future. To return to the present, he would need to chant the same words again, and he absolutely must not forget them. The man warned him that the bracelet could only be used once and reminded him to remember everything he had said. After thinking it over, Yamato decided that he would uncover the truth immediately. He recited the words. Suddenly, the bracelet emitted a bright white light beneath him, leaving him in shock as he wondered what was happening. In an instant, Yamato vanished from the area. When he opened his eyes, he questioned whether he had truly arrived in the future, as everything appeared incredibly realistic. He wondered how far ahead he had traveled. Looking around, he noticed that nothing seemed to have changed except that the fortune teller was gone. The atmosphere felt faintly different, and even the smell in the air was unusual. He questioned again whether he was truly in the future. Suddenly, he heard Yuto calling his name. Surprised, Yamato saw Yuto and Michiru standing nearby, both still appearing to be of school age. Yuto remarked that he had thought Yamato had already gone home. Yamato felt relieved that they still addressed him casually, believing that at least he had not been left behind. Seeing that they were still in their school uniforms, he guessed that he had only traveled 1 or 2 years into the future. He noticed that they seemed slightly breathless and asked why they had been running and whether they were perhaps together. Yuto denied it and explained that someone had shouted for everyone to run, causing people to panic and scatter. Yamato felt confused. Yuto suggested that they should return home. However, they soon heard more screams. Following the noise, they arrived at a horrifying sight, a gigantic Buddha statue sitting before them. Everyone stared in confusion. Yamato sensed a strange smell in the air. A boy commented that the statue was enormous and wondered whether it was some kind of cosplay. A girl insisted that it was real and not a costume. Suddenly, the Buddha statue began to open its eyes and stretch its body. The crowd had gathered too close to observe it. Without warning, it tightened its grip and struck several people in front of it, killing them instantly. Panic erupted as people screamed and fled for their lives. Yamato froze in place. Yuto urgently told Yamato and Michiru that they needed to run. But soon, more giant Buddha statues appeared, attacking everyone in sight. In a horrifying moment, two of the statues lifted a girl and tore her apart before the eyes of Yamato, Yuto, and Michiru. Yamato stood frozen in confusion, wondering what was happening around him. He could not comprehend how so many people were dying before his eyes. He questioned whether those Buddhas were truly monsters and wondered where they had come from. As they moved forward, they saw the horrifying truth. The entire city had been heavily destroyed by the giant Buddhas. Buildings were shattered, streets were in ruins, and smoke filled the air. In the distance, an enormous Buddha statue walked through the city, accompanied by a massive army of smaller Buddhas marching behind it. Fear gripped them tightly. Yuto admitted that the situation was completely out of control. Yamato struggled to understand how something so catastrophic could have happened when they had only been living ordinary, peaceful lives just moments before. He wished desperately that they could return to those normal days. At that moment, he thought about the bracelet. He realized that if he returned to the past, he could use the knowledge of the future to uncover the truth behind the disaster and try to prevent it. He understood that people would likely mock him and refuse to believe such an unbelievable story. However, he also realized that this was not the time to worry about being ridiculed. He resolved that he would continue insisting on the truth no matter what. Perhaps, if he persisted, he could at least convince the authorities or the military to take action. He knew it would be incredibly difficult if no one believed him, but he had to try. In the worst-case scenario, he believed that Michiru and Yuto would stand by him and help him. Yamato felt certain that Yuto and Michiru would believe him if he told them the truth. However, he admitted to himself that he had no idea what the situation was like outside of Tokyo. He realized that their first priority would be escaping the city safely. He began forming a plan in his mind. After returning to the past, he would convince everyone of the coming disaster. They would need to gather water and food rations, secure a generator and fuel, and find a safe place to hide. Although they were only high school students and their capabilities were limited, he resolved that they would do as much as they possibly could. He understood that preparing for something on that scale would take time, perhaps even a year. Just then, he asked Michiru for her phone so he could check the time. When she handed it to him, Yamato assumed he must have traveled 1 or 2 years into the future. However, as he looked at the screen and compared it with the time on his own watch, his expression froze. The date was the same. The only difference between the two times was 5 minutes. Stunned, he asked Michiru what year it was. She replied that it was 2018. Yamato was left in complete shock. After chanting the mysterious words, he had only traveled 5 minutes into the future. Confusion overwhelmed him as he wondered what he could possibly accomplish in such a short amount of time. The police had arrived and were asking for permission to open fire, but before they could receive approval, the giant statue moved forward and crushed 2 people. It continued advancing, and the monsters kept killing everyone in sight. Yamato was completely shocked, wondering how everything had changed within just 5 minutes. The moment he had used the single-use future travel bracelet he had bought from that sketchy fortune teller, the monsters had appeared. The future he had seen was only 5 minutes ahead of his present time. Even if he went back again, he knew he would not be able to accomplish much in just 5 minutes. Michiru noticed the sweat on his face and grabbed his hand, telling him to calm down and assuring him that everything would be fine. Yamato felt confused, and she then revealed that she had read about such events in the rapey book. Seeing that his breathing had become quick and shallow, she advised him to breathe more slowly. Yamato tried to follow her instructions and gradually calmed himself. He thought that he still had the chance to explain how he had come from the past. He called out to the others, but before they could respond, they suddenly saw Shinji arriving with their other friends. They were heavily injured and asking for help. Shinji was struggling badly and said that he did not want to die. He explained that the giant Utha monster had lifted a boy into the air and crushed him. Everyone began running to save their lives, but suddenly Michiru shouted at them, telling everyone to calm down. She warned them that there might be other monsters nearby and that there was no need to run blindly. She then asked if anyone knew of a place where the monsters would not be able to find them. After thinking for a moment, one boy mentioned that the underground sidewalk was very narrow and could possibly provide shelter. Michiru immediately told everyone that they should head there. She also asked Yuto to help the others. At that moment, Shinji clung to Yamato, saying that he was barely able to stand. Suddenly, the monster threw another boy toward them and began approaching as they ran toward the narrow passageway. They hurried into the underground path, hoping that if they hid there, the monsters would not be able to find them. Meanwhile, Yamato used the bracelet again and leaped 5 minutes ahead in time. Michiru wondered whether she had been right about everything, and Yamato agreed with her concerns. Yuto then asked Yamato whether chanting the same words again would allow him to return 5 minutes into the past. Yamato replied that he was not entirely sure himself, but even with those 5 minutes, they would not be able to escape or properly prepare for anything. He felt frustrated with himself. questioning why the monsters had appeared and why all of this was happening to them. In his worry, he said that he only wanted to know whether he, Yuto, and Michiru would always remain together. Michiru responded that she truly believed Yamato, explaining that he and Yuto had never lied to her. Yuto also expressed his belief partly because Michiru trusted Yamato, but mostly because he felt that Yamato would never have the courage to lie in such a dangerous situation and had never shown any strange behavior regarding the bracelet. Yamato then thought that he was being selfish and deceptive, realizing that instead of doubting himself, he should be focusing on protecting his friends. Yamato then remembered a time from their childhood when the three of them had been crying together. A lady had been standing in front of them, angrily saying that they had done something terrible by burning part of the science room. Yamato recalled that they had been conducting a science experiment using alcohol, but had ended up fooling around too much. The teacher had declared that she would call their parents and wondered aloud whose parents she should contact first. Although Michiru had originally come up with the idea, Yamato had encouraged it, and Yuto had been the one who poured the gasoline. All three of them had been responsible and equally deserving of blame. However, while crying, Yamato had raised his hand and apologized, taking full responsibility for everything. He had done so because he knew that Michiru's parents were very strict, and Yuto was his brother, so he felt he had to protect them both. The teacher had listened and then stated that she would call all of their parents anyway. Yamato had been confused when he noticed that Michiru and Yuto had also raised their hands, silently admitting their part in the incident. While crying, Yamato had wondered why they were doing such a thing. Michiru had replied that it was because she could not allow them to take all the blame alone. Eventually, both of their families had arrived, and they had been harshly scolded. However, despite their tears, they had secretly felt happy, and it was at that moment that Yamato had decided he would always protect them. The scene then shifted back to the present. Yamato realized that they had no idea what those monsters were, and because of that uncertainty, he was sure that if the creatures found them, they would all die. He thought that if anything happened to Michiru or Yuto, he would use the bracelet to return to the past. Suddenly, a girl stood up and began running, saying that she wanted to go home and calling out for her mother. Moments later, everyone saw her head struck by the corpse of another boy as the monster arrived. It moved toward them, destroying the ceiling as it advanced. When a boy tried to stop it with a metal rod, he was thrown aside and struck brutally. Michiru told everyone to remain calm and said that they should focus on running in the opposite direction to find another place to hide. The others agreed and remarked that she was truly amazing. Yamato thought that even in such a terrifying situation, Michiru seemed calm and fearless. However, he then noticed that her legs were trembling, and he realized he had been foolish to assume she was not afraid. Soon, the path beneath them was blocked, and the ceiling behind them collapsed, leaving them with no escape. The monster continued approaching, and Yamato wondered what they should do. Then they noticed a small opening at the edge of the rubble. Yamato urged Michiru to go through first. She hesitated at first, but he shouted that she needed to go immediately. While the monster attacked other students, Shinji climbed up toward the opening. At that moment, the monster approached a trembling girl who begged for mercy, saying she would do anything it wanted. The monster killed her mercilessly. After that, Yuto and Yamato attempted to escape. Yuto managed to climb through and asked Yamato to take his hand. Just as Yamato escaped, the monster's hand reached out to grab him but failed. For a brief moment, they felt relieved. Yamato said that they needed to move away quickly. However, they noticed that Michiru was standing silently. When they asked if something was wrong, she pointed ahead. As Yamato looked forward, they were horrified to see the giant monster standing there. He wondered if it was the same creature that had destroyed the ceiling and whether it possessed intelligence. The monster had multiple hands, and it used them to launch a powerful attack toward them. Yamato and the others ran, but Yamato realized that he did not even have time to chant the words needed to activate the bracelet. All he wanted was to protect them. The monster struck, and although they somehow survived the impact, Yamato quickly checked on everyone, asking if they were safe. That was when he discovered that Michiru had been severely injured. They were all shocked, but Michiru was smiling and said that she was just glad Yamato was unharmed. Yamato felt a surge of guilt and anger at himself. He had once sworn that he would be her shield, and now he could not understand why she had done such a thing. Michiru explained that Yamato had been about to get hurt, so she had chosen to become his shield instead. Yamato protested, saying that he had seen what happened and questioned why she would sacrifice herself like that. She replied that in such a moment, it was the only thing she could do and that she had decided long ago to repay him. She asked if he remembered the incident in the science room when their parents had been called. She admitted that she had been deeply touched by what he had done that day and had decided that she would return the favor someday. Yamato remembered the moment clearly. Michiru then told him that he could not die because he was the only one who could go back 5 minutes before the tragedy, and that ability was extremely important. Yamato hesitated, arguing that 5 minutes were not enough to prepare or escape. She responded that if he thought like that, then returning would be meaningless. Instead, even if he could not prepare or run in those 5 minutes, he needed to find a way to stop the tragedy from happening. Yamato and Yuto thought about her words as she continued, saying that any method would be acceptable, whether defeating the monsters or driving them away. That was why Yamato should not return to the past immediately. In those 5 minutes ahead, he needed to observe and learn about the monsters, their origin, their purpose, and their weaknesses. Once he gathered enough information, he would be able to change the future, and only then should he return to the past. She then asked Yuto to take good care of Yamato. Yamato broke down in tears, begging her to stop. He said that someone like him, who had never done anything extraordinary, could not possibly save the world, especially not without her. As she took her final breaths, Michiru told him that she had something important to say. She confessed that since they were children, she had loved him. Everything fell silent. After expressing her wish to meet again someday, she closed her eyes. Yamato refused to believe it at first, but when he sensed her fading warmth and familiar scent, he finally accepted the truth and cried uncontrollably while holding her in his arms. Yamato was crying uncontrollably, begging Michiru to stay alive for him. However, despite his grief, he began chanting the words needed to return to the past. A bright light started to emit from his body, leaving Shinji completely shocked. Yamato believed that by chanting the same words, he could return to the past, and he kept reminding himself not to forget them. Yuto noticed what was happening and wondered if Yamato was truly attempting to go back in time. Realizing this, Yuto rushed forward and struck Yamato, demanding to know what he was doing. Yamato told Yuto not to interfere, insisting that he was going back to the past to save Michiru. Yuto questioned whether Yamato had already forgotten what Michiru had told him. He reminded him that she had clearly said he should not return to the past yet. Instead, she had instructed him to use the 5 minutes in the future to figure out what they were truly facing. He emphasized that Yamato needed to understand what the monsters wanted and discover their weaknesses. Yuto further reminded him that Yamato was the only person capable of going back in time, and therefore, the only one who could possibly change the future and save the world. Yamato shouted at Yuto to be quiet, saying that he did not care about anything else as long as Michiru was alive. Yuto grabbed him by the collar and yelled at him to listen carefully, explaining that even if Yamato returned to the past, the same events would simply repeat themselves. Through his tears, Yamato argued that Michiru would have survived if she had not shielded him. As their argument intensified, they heard Shinji crying desperately. Shinji admitted that he was terrified of dying and feared that he would be next. He confessed that he did not want to die. Hearing this, Yamato and Yuto stopped fighting. They decided to leave the area, but before doing so, Yamato insisted that they bury Michiru's body. After burying her, they left. It was now 10:28 p.m. May 17th. The monsters, especially the monstrous Buddha statues, were still roaming throughout the city, while Yamato, Yuto, and Shinji hid in fear. Yamato began wondering about their next plan. Yuto suggested that they leave the city entirely to avoid being found by the monsters. Shinji questioned whether there was truly any place where the monsters would not be able to find them. Yuto admitted that he did not know, especially since the internet was down and they had no information about the nearby towns. Shinji then said he was extremely thirsty. They noticed a shrine that appeared untouched and decided to search for water there. While Yamato and Shinji sat near the water area, Yuto spotted a van nearby and went to inspect it. As they waited, Yamato remarked that Yuto was always calm and composed, even though he knew Yuto must have been just as devastated as he was. Yamato even wished that Yuto had been the one with the time travel ability, believing he would have handled the situation better and ensured Michiru's survival. Lost in thought, Yamato sensed a strange smell, one he associated with Michiru and Yuto, and felt a wave of regret, wishing he could ask her so many unanswered questions. Shinji then sat beside Yamato and asked whether he could truly go back in time. He admitted that he felt jealous and wished he could return as well. He reflected that the 5 minutes they had once spent casually together with Yuto and Takafumi had been precious, even if things had sometimes been annoying. Suddenly, Shinji noticed a Buddha statue behind him. Half-jokingly, he suggested making a donation and placed some coins in front of it, asking it to watch over them and keep them safe. At that moment, Yamato sensed the strange smell again and urgently told Shinji that they needed to leave because it was not safe. Suddenly, the Buddha statue grabbed Shinji's hand, paralyzing him. Shinji froze in shock as the statue began to move. Hearing his cries of pain, Yuto rushed out of the van to check on them and was stunned to see the statue moving. Yamato attempted to strike the Buddha with a wooden board, but it had no effect. The statue moved to capture them, but Yamato pulled Shinji back and noticed that the statue's leg was chained to the ground where it had originally stood. Yamato realized that this statue, like the earlier monsters, appeared to have been restrained with chains or some form of confinement. However, before they could process it further, the Buddha lifted a heavy object and hurled it at them. They barely dodged and attempted to flee. Suddenly, a massive door burst open and another giant Buddha statue emerged with its hands bound. They stared in horror as the giant statue tore off the ceiling and hurled the entire structure toward Yamato and Shinji, severely injuring them. Struggling to rise, Yamato felt helpless, thinking that he had accomplished nothing. Despite his injuries, he forced himself up and told Yuto and Shinji to run immediately. He declared that he would act as a decoy to buy them time. Yamato deliberately tried to lure the Buddha statue away so that it would follow him. Meanwhile, Shinji began running from the area. The Buddha attempted to seize Yamato, but he narrowly dodged the attack. Yamato thought to himself that he could not bear to watch anyone else die in front of him like Michiru had. He believed he had to give them a chance to escape, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Suddenly, the Buddha tore a massive pillar from the structure and swung it at Yamato. Before he could recover, the monster lifted him into the air with one of its enormous hands, leaving Shinji horrified. As Yamato hung helplessly, he thought that at the very least Yuto and Shinji should escape. However, just as the situation seemed hopeless, Yuto drove the bus straight into the monster, crashing into it and forcing it to release Yamato. Yuto quickly asked whether Yamato was safe and told him that they needed to use the bus to escape. He also called out to Shinji, urging him to get on board immediately. Both Yamato and Shinji were stunned, wondering how Yuto even knew how to drive. Yuto explained that he had often watched drivers carefully while commuting to school and had learned the basics that way. Yamato, overwhelmed with emotion, shouted at Yuto, questioning why they had not simply escaped when they had the chance. He argued that if they had left earlier, they might have been far away by now. He angrily asked what would have happened if both of them had died trying to save him, insisting that his attempt to act as a decoy would have been meaningless. Yuto calmly responded that Yamato was their only hope. He then warned them to hold on tightly because the monster was blocking their path. Since they had no other direction to go, he said they would have to drive straight through it. Shinji apologized, admitting that he had run away without helping Yamato. Yamato wondered what Shinji was even talking about. However, Shinji told him not to worry, explaining that even if Yamato had been there, he would not have been able to do anything. Yuto then suggested that they cut through the Buddha monster, which was already prepared to attack them with its massive fist. Suddenly, Yuto made a sharp drift, leaving everyone in shock. They soon realized that the bus had passed sideways by the Buddha, narrowly avoiding its attack. Yamato wondered how Yuto had managed to perform such a maneuver. Yuto replied that he had simply tried something he had seen in a video. Shinji remarked that Yuto was truly impressive and said that it was all thanks to him that they had managed to get past the Buddha. However, they suddenly heard a loud rumbling sound. When they looked behind, they saw that the Buddha had already grabbed hold of the bus. Yuto quickly told Yamato and Shinji to hold on tight, saying that he would try to shake it off. Despite his efforts, the Buddha refused to release the bus and even managed to bring it to a stop. Although Yuto pressed hard on the accelerator, they soon realized that one of the bus tires was lifted into the air by the Buddha. Moments later, the creature swung the entire bus around and hurled it toward a nearby building. All three of them were severely injured and had even been thrown out of the building. The Buddha monster continued approaching them, and Shinji noticed that it was running toward Yamato and Yuto. He recalled how he had earlier apologized to Yamato and remembered saying that if they were able to face such danger, then he would do the same. Determined to act, Shinji took the driver's seat and drove the bus toward the Buddha, crashing it against the wall once again. Yamato felt a brief sense of relief, thinking that the Buddha would brutally collide with the bus from behind. Meanwhile, Yuto warned Shinji to leave immediately. However, Shinji refused to retreat. He struck the Buddha again and apologized, explaining that although he did not know how to drive properly, the only thing he could manage was putting the bus in reverse. He urged Yamato and Yuto to run away while they still could. As the Buddha prepared to smash the bus again, Shinji reversed it forcefully, slamming the creature into the wall once more. He once again told Yamato and Yuto to escape. They wondered what Shinji was thinking and questioned why he would risk his life like that, believing that he should not sacrifice himself. Through tears, Yamato confessed that he truly hated seeing the friends he cared about dying before his eyes and said that he could no longer endure such pain. Shinji realized how kind Yamato truly was and recalled their childhood. He remembered a time when some bullies had written cruel things about him on his desk, and Yamato had confronted the situation, questioning who had scribbled such things and remarking that it was not right. The scene returned to the present where Yamato attempted to go back and help Shinji, but Yuto urged him to leave. Shinji felt deeply grateful to Yamato, reflecting that he had always been a coward who had never acted for someone else's sake. Yet this was the first time he had chosen to do so. As the Buddha monster prepared to strike him, Yamato shouted at Shinji, telling him not to act foolishly. Shinji looked toward Yamato and said that a few minutes earlier he had realized they would not be able to properly explain what they had just done. Yuto added that Yamato was their only hope, their sole chance of survival. He explained that although they might cry, it was not truly a farewell because Yamato still possessed the power to return to the past and bring all of them back to life. Yamato was completely shocked upon hearing those words. With trembling hands, Shinji gave him a thumbs up and told him that he must not die under any circumstances. Yamato returned the gesture, silently acknowledging him, and then left the scene along with Yuto. As the Buddha prepared to attack Shinji, Shinji placed his faith entirely in Yamato, believing that everything now rested in his hands. The scene shifted to the past, where Michiru had been sitting in her school classroom, quietly reading a book. Yamato had asked her why she read so much. She had replied that she read to gain knowledge and experience, explaining that books allowed people to learn from the ordeals of others. She mentioned that although she had never been to an uninhabited island, she could still understand such experiences through reading. She had also admitted that one of her reasons for reading was that she felt happy sharing what she learned with Yamato, Yuto, her sister, and her father. However, she had asked Yamato not to tell her sister about that reason, as it was her little secret. The scene returned to the present, where Yamato opened his eyes and wondered whether he had been dreaming. As he got up, he saw Yuto nearby and questioned what had happened to their surroundings. Yuto replied that everything seemed quiet so far and that there was no sign of the Buddha. He added that they had not seen the gigantic Buddha since the previous night. Yamato felt grateful to Yuto for keeping watch. The two of them ate some canned food. Yamato reflected that 3 days had passed since the monsters had appeared and that nothing would ever be the same again, as Michiru and Shinji were dead. He remarked that their phones no longer worked and that they had barely managed to return home. Everything around them had been reduced to rubble and splintered wood. Yuto then asked what they should do next. Yamato responded that they needed to uncover everything about the Buddhas and change the future. He declared that he would go back 5 minutes in time for the sake of Shinji and Michiru. However, he admitted that the monsters were terrifying and questioned how they could possibly gather useful information when everyone was being killed so easily. He asked Yuto whether he had any ideas. Yuto apologized and confessed that he did not. While they were sitting there, they suddenly heard a rumbling sound. They immediately lowered their heads to hide. When nothing appeared nearby, Yamato wondered what kind of noise it had been. As Yuto pointed out the direction of the sound, they realized it was coming from Michiru's house. They decided to enter the partially buried house to investigate and then leave quickly. Yuto instructed Yamato to check upstairs. Although Yamato still felt conflicted about being ordered around, he followed the instruction. He entered Michiru's room and felt as though it had been 2 years since he had last stepped inside. He had expected it to be filled with books, but instead, it looked surprisingly beautiful and well arranged. When he opened the wardrobe, he accidentally saw her undergarments and immediately felt embarrassed. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from another wardrobe, and Yuto joined him. Together, they opened it and discovered Kakeru, Michiru's younger sister, hiding inside. She appeared cold and frightened, clutching a few books while others lay scattered around her. She said that she was relieved to see they were safe. Yamato and Yuto felt immense happiness upon finding her alive and silently thanked God, wondering where she had been all this time. Kakeru revealed that she had been constantly moving from place to place trying to hide from the Buddhas. Yamato rushed forward, and upon seeing that Kakeru was safe, Yuto said that they were relieved and that it had already been a year since everything had changed. Kakeru responded that her sister would have felt the same way. However, confusion arose when Kakeru asked them to stop calling her by that name, saying that she truly disliked being called Kakeru. She then questioned them about her sister and wondered what was happening, remarking that they always appeared as though they were lost whenever they came there. With heavy hearts, Yamato and Yuto apologized and explained that Michiru was gone. Takeru, angered by the name they used, reacted sharply when they called her that. Ignoring the interruption, Yamato revealed that Michiru had died while protecting him. Kakeru was stunned and insisted that they must be joking, arguing that her sister could never die like that. Trembling, she approached them and shouted, demanding that they say something, anything, to prove it was not true. Yamato apologized again. Suddenly, Yamato sensed that strange smell once more. Yuto noticed his reaction and asked whether something was wrong, but Yamato dismissed it, saying it was nothing. Yuto then asked Kakeru why she had been hiding in the closet and whether she had been hiding from the Buddhas. She replied that she had done so because her sister had instructed her to. The boys were confused. Takeru then explained that her sister had always enjoyed making both her and their father listen as she read books aloud. She revealed that in one particular book, there had been a story strikingly similar to the events currently unfolding in the world, Michiru had also kept a diary since childhood, recording what had happened each day, how she had felt, as well as the titles, authors, and summaries of the books she read. Kakeru explained that she had been reading those diaries in hopes of finding a clue, something that could help them understand how to put an end to the catastrophe. Yamato and Yuto grew curious and asked Kakeru whether she had found any clues about what the Buddhas truly were. Kakeru replied that she was not certain yet, explaining that she had only just begun searching for answers. She added that the content of one particular book closely resembled the events currently unfolding in the world. Yuto appreciated her effort and assured her that they would help her in the search. As Yamato glanced at the large pile of books, he remarked that there were far too many to go through. Kakeru reminded them once again not to call her Kakeru, firmly stating that she despised that name. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the building, leaving all three of them stunned. Yuto urged the others to look outside, explaining that the SDF had finally arrived. Yamato realized that the earlier rumbling sound must have come from tanks and concluded that the military was targeting the Buddhas. When they looked outside, they saw numerous Buddhas advancing. Yamato warned that the SDF was about to engage in battle and suggested that they leave before getting caught in the crossfire. Kakeru pointed out that they could not possibly carry all the diaries with them. At that moment, the floor beneath her cracked and began to collapse. Before she could fall, Yamato and Yuto grabbed her. Yamato quickly gathered as many books as he could, while Yuto helped support both Kakeru and the remaining diaries. Nearby, a soldier informed his officer that he had spotted civilians. The officer responded that it was their duty to ensure the civilians' safety, while the rest continued advancing. The soldier called out to them, expressing relief that they were safe, and assuring them that the situation should now be left to the SDF. Kakeru, however, questioned whether they could truly defeat those monsters. Yamato was taken aback by her doubt. The soldier gently patted her head and told her that humanity had always created tools to fight and survive, claiming that humans were the most capable among living beings. He added that they trained daily to master their weapons. The SDF opened fire on the Buddhas, but the attacks appeared ineffective. Tao wondered aloud whether the assault was even working. Yuto observed that the military seemed to be merely holding the Buddhas back. The captain then ordered the troops to load 120mm armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding Sabat rounds and fire. The APF SDS shells, though smaller and longer than standard rounds, traveled at extremely high speed, minimizing kinetic energy loss and providing exceptional penetration power. A massive explosion struck the Buddhas, astonishing Yamato, Kakeru, and Yuto. The soldier confidently declared that humanity could not possibly lose, and urged them to leave the area to ensure their safety. As they turned to escape, they suddenly heard another sound. When they looked back, they saw that one of the Buddhas had already moved close enough to kill the soldier. They were horrified. Yamato realized that the previous attack had not worked at all. Suddenly, he noticed a gun lying nearby. As he moved to grab it, the monster prepared to attack. Yamato managed to seize the weapon, telling himself that he had to fight for the sake of Shinji and Michiru. He understood that ordinary bullets would likely be ineffective, yet he refused to accept dying there as an option. He fired at the monster, and to everyone's shock, to see that the creature was suddenly split cleanly in half, but not by the fire of Yamato. They all stood frozen, confused about what had just happened. At that moment, a mysterious man appeared and explained that there were specific rules for subjugating those beasts. He stated that guns and explosives were generally ineffective against them and warned that the restraints on their arms and legs must never be removed. He further clarified that the only way to truly kill them was to sever the head from the body completely. Yamato, bewildered, asked who the man was. The man calmly replied that he was simply someone who had returned from the future. Yuto wondered, along with Yamato, whether that person was the one who had just defeated the Buddhas and how he had managed to do so. Kakeru stated that the man seemed knowledgeable about the situation. Yuto also mentioned the floating spear beside the man. They all approached him and thanked him for saving their lives. The man took the gun and told them to throw it away, saying that it was useless against the Buddhas. He then asked them to wait, explaining that he still had to eliminate the remaining ones. In an instant, he killed all of them, leaving everyone shocked. One SDF member remained, and as the Buddhas approached him, he became terrified and took out his small gun. However, before they could strike him, the man stepped in between and used the spear to defeat every Buddha. Yamato expressed his appreciation, while Kakeru wondered how the spear could float and attack on its own, questioning whether it was some kind of machine. As more Buddhas advanced, the man blocked their attacks with the spear. Everyone was stunned, wondering when the spear had even returned to his hand. Yuto realized that brute force alone could not break through it. The man felt that the situation had become a nuisance. He then transformed the spear into a scalpel, which shocked them all. Kakeru concluded that since it could change its shape, it could not be an ordinary machine. Upon the man's command to slice the Buddhas, the scalpel cut them down instantly. At that moment, Yamato understood how he had been saved. Yuto thought that the man had defeated the Buddhas as if it were nothing. He then remembered that the man was supposedly from the future. The man glanced at his wrist and remarked that it was about time. Just then, Yuto excused himself, hesitating as he wondered about something. He approached the man and asked whether he had already been there once before. The man replied that the situation had been quite chaotic and warned that the Buddhas would gather again soon, making it dangerous to stay nearby. He added that he had an appointment he could not afford to miss. He also asked them to take the injured soldier with them. After that, he left, while they remained confused about everything that had just happened. Yuto then suggested that the two of them might be the same. By that, he meant that both of them might have leaped into the future and then returned to the past, which was now their present. He believed that the possibility of such an event was very high. Yamato wondered whether that person was truly the same as him. Meanwhile, the man went downstairs to the clockwork store where he found several men waiting. He asked whether they were holding up well, and they all agreed that they were. Yamato noticed that Yuminori was there along with a few others. Yuminori stated that he was truly glad to see that they were alive. Kakeru asked who he was, and Yuto explained that Yuminori was their classmate and also a member of the soccer club. Kakeru seemed curious and wondered why Yuminori was there. Yamato appeared confused, while Yuto wondered whether Yuminori had also traveled to the future. Yuminori denied that, but mentioned that he had been saved by Jiro. Yamato wondered if Jiro was the person in the black coat. Yuminori confirmed that when the Buddhas had appeared, Jiro had saved him. Yamato felt saddened, realizing that Yuminori had also witnessed the horrifying events. He admitted that he was genuinely happy to see Yuminori again. However, Yuminori replied that it did not concern him and that the feeling was not mutual. Yamato seemed annoyed and Yuminori eventually left. Kakeru then wondered what was wrong with him. Yuto responded that Yuminori somehow hated Yamato for some reason. Yuto added that they needed to speak with the lab-coated man, Jiro, since he was the one who had come from the future. He speculated that there was a chance Jiro was similar to Yamato. As they turned around, they noticed a woman and a child and wondered whether they were Jiro's companions. The boy made a teasing face but was suddenly struck lightly by the woman. Yuto approached Jiro and stated that he wanted to continue the discussion they had earlier. Another lady remarked that since Jiro was sitting nearby, perhaps whiskey would be suitable for him, and she asked the others to wait for a while. Jiro requested Macallan mixed with cola. The lady replied that it would be a waste of single malt. Jiro responded that they might not know that the flavor spread more evenly when mixed rather than drunk straight, and he claimed there was scientific backing for it. After taking a sip, Jiro asked whether they had found any survivors. When the lady denied it, Jiro stated that there had only been 4 people that day. If his memory served him correctly, he had been asked about traveling to the future. He then revealed that it had been a week since he had returned from his time leap to the future, though a year had passed there. Yamato and Yuto were shocked because Jiro was essentially the same as Yamato, but from the future, which meant he might know everything. Kakeru expressed curiosity about the situation, and Yamato suddenly asked whether they were still fighting the Buddhas in the future. Yuto continued by asking how they could fight them, what would happen in the future, and how that mysterious power worked. Both of them seemed excited, and Yamato wondered how long Jiro had been fighting, thinking that Jiro might know things that could help them. Jiro stated that he had been fighting for a very long time. They eagerly asked him to explain more about the Buddhas, why they were attacking humanity, and what their weaknesses were so they could save the world. However, Jiro replied that he did not even know. He said that he had spent his entire time in the future fighting and had returned to the past to search for clues, but he believed it had all been in vain. He admitted that he thought the same as they did. Just then, the boy clung to Yamato and Yuto and declared that the old man simply did not know how to change the past and had returned from the future screaming because he did not want to die. Yamato and Yuto left in shock after learning that Jiro had failed. They were stunned to realize that even with his immense capabilities and his ability to fight to such an extent, he had still been overpowered in the end. Jiro stated that he had been the only one with the power to stand against them, which was why he had continued fighting and struggling until the bitter end. Suddenly, Yuto and Yamato declared that they would do everything possible to uncover the truth about the Buddhas in that world and that they would change the past. Jiro wondered what they meant by that. In response, Yamato revealed his bracelet and explained that both he and Jiro had time leaped from the past. He clarified that although he had not yet returned to the past himself, they were desperately searching for a way to alter it. Jiro was shocked when he noticed the pattern engraved on Yamato's bracelet, as it was identical to the one on his own locket, the symbol given by the fortune teller. At that moment, he realized that he was not the only one connected to this mystery. Another lady questioned whether Yamato was truly the same as Jiro. The girl felt that Yamato seemed extraordinary. Meanwhile, Kakeru wondered what it truly meant that Yamato had come from the past. Finally, Jiro asked them whether they wished to obtain that odd genius-level power as well. Yuto wondered whether Jiru was referring to the power that had just defeated the Buddhas. Kakeru too felt curious about the odd genius Jiru had mentioned earlier. Yamato asked eagerly whether they could also obtain that power. Jiru replied that he did not know. Suddenly, Jiru, along with Yuminori, Himawari, Kazuki, and Ren, revealed their spears, which left the others stunned. Yamato was especially surprised to see that Yuminori possessed one as well. Jiru explained that it had only been 2 or 3 days since their abilities had sprouted. Himawari jokingly remarked that they could at least claim they had mastered it. Yamato began to think that perhaps they could fight too. Yuto then asked what they needed to do and how they could obtain that strange genius power. Jiru responded that the process was very simple. He reminded them that he was a doctor and explained that he would inject the purified OW54 serum through the neck directly into their spinal cords. Hearing this, they hesitated and were visibly disturbed, as it sounded extremely painful. Jiru stated that if they could not handle it, he would not proceed. He warned that if they planned to risk their lives half-heartedly, they would only end up dying pathetically. However, he added that they might not need to undergo the procedure, since they would instead be protecting the children. Yamato understood that survival had to remain his first priority. Jiru reminded him that saving Michiru and Shinji was more important than anything else. Suddenly, Yamato caught the scent of Michiru. Shocked, he rushed outside and headed upstairs, wondering how it could even be possible. Yet he was certain he was not mistaken. It was undeniably Michiru's scent. When he stepped outside, he saw a giant Buddha walking away. Yamato realized it was the same one that had killed Michiru. He recognized that the scent was coming from it. All at once, Yamato began to feel uneasy. As the others followed him outside, Jiru quickly grabbed him and pulled him back inside to hide. Yamato wondered what Jiru was doing. Jiru urged him to stay silent, admitting that he was still unsure, but he observed that the powerful Buddha was being followed by many others, almost as if it were leading them all, their commander. Yamato was overwhelmed with rage and demanded that Jiru give him the odd genius power immediately. Heisha felt confused upon hearing this. Yamato then revealed that the Buddha outside was the one responsible for Michiru's death. Consumed by fury, he insisted that Jiru grant him that power so that he could defeat the Buddha and avenge Michiru. Yamato was practically begging Jiru for the power. In response, Jiru told him that he should at least call him by his name first. Without further warning, Jiru suddenly injected the serum into Yamato's neck. The intense pain overwhelmed Yamato to the point that he collapsed. Jiru remarked that from that moment onward, it was a matter of luck. As Yamato lay there, he suddenly remembered a moment with Michiru. She had once told him that she had heard from Yuto that he was planning to quit soccer in high school. Yamato had admitted that it was true because he was exhausted, did not consider himself talented enough, and believed he could never win against Yuto. At that time, Michiru had calculated that 4,560 hours was the amount of time he had already spent practicing soccer. She explained that if he practiced 5 hours a day for 2.5 years, that would be the total time he had dedicated to the sport. She asked him whether he truly believed all that time had been wasted. Yamato had wondered if perhaps he had indeed wasted it. However, Michiru had gently told him that it was not a waste. She said that those hours were the time he had spent chasing his dream, and she was certain they would never be in vain. She had wished him to do his best. Yamato suddenly regained consciousness in the present and found a pitch-black spear hovering above him. A military officer requested that he be injected as well, claiming that he needed the power to avenge his fallen comrades. He said he did not want to live with regrets. Jiru told him to wait and informed him that they could not afford to lose him, especially since he was the one who had provided them with the medicine. He clarified that he had only administered the injection because Yamato had insisted on it. However, Yamato must not fight until he had properly mastered the power. Yamato understood that he needed to survive. Nevertheless, deep inside, he resolved that he would destroy the Buddha who had killed Michiru, even if he had to face it alone. Suddenly, he seized the spear and rushed forward to confront the Buddha. Everyone was shocked and shouted at him to wait. Kazuki stated that there was no way Yamato could use the odd genius power properly when he had just obtained it. Himawari wondered how Yamato would even be able to move it correctly. Jiru felt that it would become problematic if Yamato ended up dying, so they should retrieve him immediately. Meanwhile, Yamato was trying to catch up with the Buddhas, but the smaller ones were blocking his path. In his heart, he wished that Michiru could watch him as he made them suffer 100 times more than what she had endured. The Buddhas suddenly turned to look at him. Yamato resolved that he would bring the giant one down in a single strike. He thrust the spear forward and aimed directly at the giant Buddha's face, shattering its head. Everyone was left in shock as Yamato managed to wield the power despite having just received it. Himawari revealed that it had taken his 2 full days to achieve something like that. Yamato felt a surge of happiness after defeating the giant Buddha. However, He soon noticed that the smaller Buddhas were advancing toward him. Without hesitation, he used the spear again to crush their heads as well, astonishing everyone further. But then, Yamato realized that 3 of the Buddhas had stopped his attack effortlessly. As Himawari sensed that the situation was turning bad, Yuto suddenly appeared behind the Buddhas and struck at them with his own spear. Yamato noticed the white, odd genius power and realized it belonged to Yuto. Yuto asked whether Yamato was all right. Yamato wondered when Yuto had managed to obtain that power. Yuto revealed that he had taken the massive injection immediately after Yamato had. He laughed and commented that for Yamato to wield the power so skillfully and so quickly was truly incredible. The others stood amazed as they witnessed the scene unfold. Suddenly, the 3 Buddhas rose again to attack them. However, Yuminori stepped forward and struck them back with his power. He explained that the essence of their genius strength was awareness, and that they needed to recognize that it was their will that manipulated the spear. He advised them to focus more clearly on their mental image of the weapon. Yuminori then told them to let him clean up the remaining Buddhas. He shaped the spear's power into gauntlet-like gloves around his hands and charged forward to strike the Buddhas, while Yuto engaged one of them in combat. As another Buddha attempted to ambush Yuto, Yamato shouted a warning. His alert proved helpful as Yuto reacted quickly, maneuvered his spear skillfully, and caused the Buddha to slip before striking its face directly. Watching them fight, Yamato thought that both Yuto and Yuminori were truly incredible, and he felt that Yuto, in particular, excelled at almost everything. Meanwhile, it was taking all of Yamato's strength just to keep moving. A few Buddhas began advancing toward Yamato. Yuminori remarked that it was only natural that old Yuto was inferior. However, Yuto responded that there had never been a single time when he believed he had truly defeated Yamato. Yamato then focused on the 3 Buddhas that resembled the earlier ones. Determined, he thought about piercing them harder and faster than before. Concentrating his will and mental image, he launched himself forward and struck them with his spear. This time, he succeeded. As he overcame them, his confidence surged. He told Yuminori and Yuto that they should finish off the remaining Buddhas together. While they continued fighting side by side, Jiru observed that those boys were truly something extraordinary. After some time, the 3 of them were completely exhausted, but they had already defeated all the Buddhas. Yamato began wondering about the giant one. Suddenly, their bodies gave out, and they collapsed as an overwhelming heaviness consumed them. Jiru approached them and informed them that if they were referring to Ragaraja, it had already left without them even noticing. He then suggested that they return to the hideout. He explained that since the odd genius had integrated into their bodies, it was not only physically taxing, but even more exhausting mentally. Yuto admitted that it was extremely difficult for him to move. Yamato felt frustrated because Michiru's body was still lying in front of him, yet he was unable to do anything more. Anger welled up inside him as he declared that he would definitely defeat that giant Buddha the next time they met. Jiru replied that he sincerely hoped so. Ren addressed them by calling them the brothers, which caused both Yamato and Yuto to look at him. Ren then rushed toward them excitedly, telling them that they had been amazing and that he really liked their powers. He introduced himself and said he would take them to the hideout. He added that after they took a proper nap, they should play together. Kazuki told Ren to calm down and lightly hit him on the head. Ren became angry and warned that he would kill her. Kazuki apologized to the others and asked them to forgive her child, explaining that Ren had become overly excited after watching them fight. Yamato responded that it was fine. Kazuki then introduced herself and asked them to remember her name. Himawari asked whether Yamato and Yuto were twin brothers. She introduced herself and admitted that she had never imagined they would have such control over their odd genius on their first attempt. She said it had been truly inspiring. She then shook hands with both of them and expressed her hope that they would all get along. Yamato blushed upon being praised by an adult. Himawari added that despite their impressive performance, they still had a long way to go, and he admitted he felt slightly jealous of their natural talent. Meanwhile, Ren began using inappropriate language around Himawari, prompting Kazuki to warn him to watch his words. Himawari then turned to Yuto and praised him further, saying he had been amazed by how he handled the spear as if it were a third arm. Kazuki and Ren also commented that Yuto might already be the strongest among them from the very beginning. Hearing all of this, Yamato began to feel jealous. Himawari asked Yamato and Yuto to introduce themselves. After they did so, the others gathered around Yuto and walked away with him, leaving Yamato standing alone. Yamato felt hurt and isolated. Suddenly, they heard a commotion. A military officer had grabbed Jiru by the collar and angrily demanded to know what everything meant. Jiru tried to calm him down, but the soldier questioned how he could remain calm when he had also received the injection. He demanded to know why he could not wield the spear like Yamato and Yuto. Jiru explained that he believed he had already mentioned that it depended on luck. Statistically, only about 25% of humans could successfully use the spear, and unfortunately, the soldier did not belong to that group. The soldier harshly criticized himself in frustration. He then turned toward Yamato and Yuto and remarked bitterly that it was good for them that they would get their revenge. Kazuki questioned whether that was an appropriate way to speak to children. Jiru then urged everyone to head inside before any monsters or Buddhas discovered them again. As they began moving downstairs, Kakeru remained outside, staring at the ruined city. She wondered what it must look like beyond the city's borders. Yamato stepped outside and warned her that it was dangerous to remain out there. She replied that she had told him countless times that she hated being called by that name, Kakeru. Yamato realized that she had addressed him directly by his name as well, and the absence of honorifics felt strange to him, especially since they were younger. Kakeru then said that she had seen Yamato and Yuto fighting, and that Yamato had fought alongside him bravely. Yamato suddenly apologized, admitting that he had been unable to retrieve Ichiro's body. He felt deeply guilty and asked her to wait, promising that he would surely go after the giant Buddha and bring her body back. Kakeru stated that it did not seem that way. Yamato was confused to hear her say that. She then revealed that, compared to Yuto, she actually liked Yamato more. Yamato blushed and wondered what she meant. Kakeru explained that it was because Yamato was similar to her, someone who was always losing miserably to a younger sibling and eventually trying to run away from it all. She said that he was just like her, constantly feeling miserable and attempting to escape from her perfect sister. She then asked that if it were true that Yamato could return to the past, couldn't he simply survive by running away again? She added that at least it would give him an excuse, since fighting pathetically did not suit him. They both went back inside. Yamato commented that after he had come all that way for her, she was acting rather cold. Internally, he reflected that Kakeru must have cared deeply about Mishiru, as they had gotten along very well in the past. When Yamato entered the room, Yuto was explaining that the giant Buddha they had encountered was Ragaraja. Based on its appearance, it resembled Via Raja, a figure known for transforming worldly lust into spiritual revelation. Yuto added that even in his own future timeline, such Buddhas acted as they pleased. He further explained that, for simplicity, there was a ranking system based on size and power, although exceptions existed. The Amitabhas roaming around were classified as F rank, while Ragarajas were A rank. Kazuki remarked that it would be an extremely difficult opponent. Himawari then asked about the absurdly massive Buddha that had first attacked the city. Jiru answered that it was the Zival-crowned Amitabha, a being beyond A rank, the highest classification S rank. Kazuki questioned how they were supposed to defeat something like that. Yamato then asked how they had fought against A rank and S rank Buddhas in the future. Jiru replied that many of his comrades had fought bravely against them and perished, yet even then, they had not managed to significantly harm a single A rank or S rank Buddha. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. Jiru revealed that the future he had come from was 6 months after the tragedy, and by the time he discovered the odd genius, there were hardly any humans left. The Buddhas had spread everywhere, destroying everything in their path, leaving nothing behind. At that rate, he warned, mankind would be completely annihilated within 2 more years. The revelation left everyone in shock, unsure of what to do next. Yamato turned to look at Kakeru, who was already staring at him. He remembered her earlier words, asking whether he would simply survive by running away. After a moment, Yamato declared that if that was the case, then they would simply destroy the future that Jiru had described. Kazuki, confused, asked what he meant. Yamato admitted that he did not know the exact details, but he had heard that the future was formed by countless individual threads. In the future Jiru had witnessed, all the A rank and S rank Buddhas were still alive. Therefore, if they killed Ragaraja, they would effectively remove one thread from that destined future. He reasoned that if they continued altering events in this way, breaking the pattern step by step, they might reach a completely different future altogether. They all gave it some thought, and Kazuki wondered whether he could really do that. Yamato replied that whether he could or not was something they would find out by defeating the Ragaraja. He added that given their current situation, they had no other choice, so their only option was to change things one step at a time. Besides, he said that they could still save many lives. He suggested that there might still be safe places outside the city and that if the citizens and the self-defense force teamed up, there might be a chance. A soldier commented that it was a very bad idea and stated that the country and its defense power were already long gone. The others were confused, and Himawari wondered whether that person was the one from the force who had been rescued by Jiru. The man introduced himself as Morita and reported that on the same day as the incident in the city, the Buddhas had suddenly begun appearing, killing a large number of people and demolishing the entire city. He explained that the self-defense force had been prepared to fight them, but the government had taken too long, deliberating whether the situation could be classified as a natural disaster-based emergency, to which they were authorized to respond. In accordance with Article 16, Item 1, they had been instructed to wait before taking any defensive action. He added that they had even ended up arguing over the ideal response until it was too late. As a result, they had not been allowed to go out and fight even once. He said that his squad had eventually decided to charge at the enemy as the last survivors. He questioned what they thought they could accomplish on their own, and added that Yamato should not be taking the situation lightly. Suddenly, Jiru appeared and stated that Morita was wrong because there were already 3 possible futures. Everyone was confused, and Morita asked what he meant by 3 futures. Jiru explained that the first future was the one in which he had gone back to the past. The second was the one in which he possessed the odd genius. The last future, he said, would be shaped by Yamato. Everyone looked at Yamato as Jiru continued, saying that, as Yamato had mentioned, if they used the odd genius to defeat the Raja and the larger Buddhas, and if they managed to change the future he already knew, they might learn the fundamental principle of how to alter the past. Everyone seemed very excited, and Ren declared that he did not know what the future held, but they were going to defeat the Ragaraja. As he used some inappropriate language, his mother reminded him once again to use proper words. Himawari commented that it was something along those lines. Kazuki suggested that they should search for the current location of the Ragaraja. The others agreed, but suddenly Jiru called out, telling them to wait because he knew its present location. He warned them to be careful, explaining that in the future, it had become such a dangerous place that no one had even dared to enter it. They then made their way inside the subway. As they stared at the dark railway tracks, they hesitated and wondered whether the Ragaraja was inside. Jiru explained that the Ragaraja had made the subway station and its line his stronghold. He added that, although it occasionally went outside, it usually stayed underground. He told them that they could wait for it to come out, but in the meantime, it would claim many lives. He urged them to proceed with caution, reminding them that they could not rely on their vision in the darkness and that they had no escape route. He also warned them that there was no way to predict what might happen. They carefully moved forward with torches in their hands. As Zaz observed their surroundings, he thought that they would never have managed without the flashlights. Jiru instructed everyone to remain steady. Suddenly, Jiro told them to stop. When Yamato looked ahead, he saw numerous Buddha statues standing along both sides of the walls. The sight left all of them shocked, and they wondered, what it all meant. Yamato wondered why all the statues were lined up there. He thought that such things should never have been inside a subway and felt certain that it was a trap. Jiru took out his odd genius and announced that it was with him. He instructed everyone to get ready and ordered them to destroy the statues. Just as they prepared to attack, the Buddha statues suddenly collapsed to the ground, leaving everyone confused. Moments later, the fallen Buddhas began crawling toward them. Ren was shocked and exclaimed that they were not supposed to move like that. He immediately launched an attack. However, just as one of them attempted to strike him, his spear blocked the blow in time. Kazuki appeared worried for him, while Ren felt as though something had flown toward him. They soon realized that the Buddhas were holding spears and throwing them in their direction. Himawari remarked that it was difficult to notice the weapons in the darkness. Jiru warned that the situation was bad and urged them to destroy the monsters immediately. Using their flashlights for visibility, they thrust their spears at the Buddhas while dodging incoming attacks. Yuto told Kakeru and Morita to stay behind him, assuring them that he would protect them. Morita asked what their plan was and whether they intended to retreat. Himawari commented that locating and targeting the Buddhas in the dark was extremely troublesome. Suddenly, he spotted one hiding in a corner and threw his spear at it. At the same time, 2 spears were hurled toward him, but he narrowly dodged them. Kazuki rushed to assist him, believing that the Buddhas would continue targeting him if he did not keep moving. Without warning, one Buddha grabbed Kazuki's leg. Before it could attack, Ren struck it down with his spear, angrily wondering how it dared to attack his mother. They were overwhelmed and confused as they were surrounded by numerous Buddhas, and the darkness made it nearly impossible for Yuto to determine their positions clearly. Someone stated that all they needed in order to win was visibility and urged them to finish the battle quickly. Soon after, a burst of fire illuminated the area for a short time, making all the Buddhas clearly visible. Taking advantage of the light, they launched a coordinated assault and finally managed to defeat every last one of them. Everyone thanked Morita for creating the flames. He replied that it was the least he could do to help and mentioned that he still had a few flares left. However, he admitted that Yamato and Yuto were on a completely different level. Morita then stood up and explained that he had joined the self-defense force because he truly wanted to protect people. That was why he envied them for being able to fight back. He urged everyone to move forward, noting that they had barely made it into the subway. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound. When they turned around, they saw that several Buddhas had stabbed Morita with their spears. Everyone was left in shock, wondering how the enemies had approached them from behind. Moments later, they looked upward and saw that the ceiling had been shattered. Numerous Buddhas were descending from above to attack them, a sight that completely terrified Himawari. Yamato and Yuto immediately attacked the Buddhas before rushing to check on Morita. They found that he was severely injured. Himawari warned them to stay alert as more Buddhas were descending from the ceiling. The group threw their spears upward simultaneously, creating what seemed like a rain of spears. Kazuki wondered aloud why there was a hole in the ceiling, and they used their abilities to block the falling enemies. Meanwhile, Yamato and Yuto urged Morita to hold on a little longer as they searched for a way to get him out. Jiru arrived and began searching for the flare gun and the remaining flares. After retrieving them, he instructed everyone to keep moving, emphasizing that the area was extremely dangerous. Yamato and Yuto attempted to carry Morita with them. Suddenly, Himawari noticed that more Buddhas were about to rain down from above and warned that they needed to escape immediately. In that moment, Morita suddenly pushed Yamato and Yuto away, allowing the Buddhas to fall onto him instead. Yamato and Yuto were horrified by what they saw, but Jiru urged them to move forward without hesitation. As Morita faced the oncoming Buddhas, he felt that it was the best he could do and silently hoped that Yamato and Yuto would succeed. He believed he was protecting the future of the country. A massive explosion erupted within the subway, leaving everyone stunned. After some time, when they illuminated the area with their torches, Himawari observed that their path toward Kanamecho Station had been completely blocked. Kazuki added that at least they would no longer have to worry about Buddhas attacking them from behind. They began wondering how long it would take before they reached the station and confronted the Ragaraja. No one knew the answer, but Yamato stated confidently that the creature was definitely somewhere ahead because he could sense its presence. As they continued forward, Ren admitted that he was unsure whether he would be able to make it, but seeing Yamato moving ahead motivated him. He told them to hurry and finish everything quickly, even pushing Yamato slightly to urge him forward. Suddenly, the ground beneath Yamato collapsed, and he fell into a deep hole. Everyone panicked. Without hesitation, Himawari leapt forward and grabbed Yamato. With one hand gripping the edge of the broken ground, he struggled to hold them both up as they dangled in midair. Yuto anxiously asked whether they were all right. Yamato replied that they were somehow safe, and that Himawari had saved him. Jiru then asked Himawari what he could see at the bottom of the hole and whether he could make out anything in the darkness. Himawari strained to look and reported that there were railway tracks below, suggesting that it was another part of the subway system. Jiru wondered if it might be the Fukutoshin line. After thinking for a moment, he told Himawari and Yamato to hold on, explaining that the rest of them would come down as well. Himawari expressed confusion, saying that descending into such darkness seemed impossible. However, he suggested that they continue along that line since it connected to their destination anyway. He felt that if everything went according to plan, they would attack as two separate groups. They exchanged glances, and Yuto called out to Yamato, telling him to be careful. Yamato replied that Yuto should do the same. Kakeru stood there quietly before saying that they were all in serious trouble because Yamato had fallen into the hole. She apologized, feeling responsible for this situation. Everyone was shocked, and Yamato quickly apologized as well, recalling how Kakeru had once fallen into a hole herself. Jiru then stated that he would pass the flare gun and the remaining flares down to them. He instructed the others to make sure that Yamato did not die. Himawari reflected on his words and declared that they should move forward and defeat the Ragaraja. With renewed determination, the two groups began advancing along their separate paths. Ahead, at the next station, they saw a gigantic Buddha sitting among the wreckage, having completely destroyed the train coaches around it. Yamato and Himawari hid behind a large Yuminori. Suddenly, a Buddha hurled a spear toward them, but they barely managed to dodge it. Yamato apologized, saying that if he had not broken his flashlight when he fell, things might not have turned out this way. Himawari replied that he was also at fault because he had not expected his flashlight battery to run out. He admitted that he had assumed they had already used all the flares and wondered what they should do next. At that moment, his eyes caught a faint spark of light reflecting off a loose wire. He asked Yamato whether he thought he could reach the severed power line using his ability. Yamato agreed to try. Himawari instructed him to strike it at his signal and create sparks. He then formed numerous knives using his power and stated that he would handle the fallen Buddhas. Yamato wondered how he intended to manage that. It appeared that he was using most of his strength just to endure the situation. He told Yamato to prepare himself as well. Yamato positioned himself, waiting for his direction. When he gave the signal, Yamato struck the power line, causing the lights to flicker on briefly. The sudden illumination revealed countless Buddhas surrounding them, and Yamato was stunned by their sheer number. Without hesitation, Himawari unleashed his power, slicing through the Buddhas and severing their heads. Meanwhile, Jiru's group continued walking. Jiro remarked that they were probably not far from Igabukuro station. However, he admitted that he was worried about Yamato and Himawari and said that they could only trust them to manage on their own. Suddenly, Yuto and Ren noticed Kakeru striking a billboard with a stone. They were confused and wondered what he was doing. Kakeru warned them not to touch him and threatened to hit them if they came any closer. Yuto apologized to the others, explaining that although Kakeru might appear aggressive, she was actually shy and sensitive, and he believed the stress was affecting her. He admitted that he had never thought she was the type to lash out like that. As Kakeru prepared to strike another object with a long rod, Jiro swiftly intervened and cut it from her hands. He asked whether she was enjoying causing trouble. Kakeru fell silent. Soon after, she spotted a door and declared that she would continue on her own before running toward it. Yuto hurried after her and asked what had happened, saying that she had been acting strangely and should at least explain herself. Kakeru replied that if they continued as they were, fighting would be meaningless. Ren shouted, asking what she was talking about since she had barely fought at all. Kakeru then asked Yuto to listen carefully. She explained that before coming there, she had read her older sister's diary. Kazuki questioned what she meant. Yuto clarified that Kakeru's sister had kept diaries in which she wrote her impressions of the books she read aloud. One of those stories described a situation identical to their current circumstances. They had brought the diaries with them, hoping they might contain clues to resolve everything. Jiro then asked how the diary was connected to Kakeru's recent behavior. Kakeru explained that she had been trying to change the future. The world described in her sister's diary was shockingly similar to their reality. Although she had initially doubted it, she realized that even their decision to enter the subway and split into two groups had been written in the story. That was why she had deliberately tried to act differently from what was written. She admitted that she had complained when Yamato fell, broken objects, and attempted to leave on her own because she feared that if they continued along the same path, their future would end exactly as it had in the story. Yuto hesitantly asked whether the diary had described a tragic ending. Kakeru confirmed that it had ended badly, with everyone dying except for the protagonist. Everyone was left in shock. Kakeru wondered whether they too would perish underground. On May 21st at 11:03, Yamato and Himawari finally reached Igabukuro station. Both of them were horrified to see that the train coaches had been completely destroyed and were filled with countless corpses. They wondered why something so devastating had happened. Suddenly, they heard a deep rumbling sound. Himawari immediately stated that the monster was approaching. They quickly hid and cautiously looked ahead, where they saw a gigantic Buddha advancing toward them, holding a train coach in each of its 6 hands. The sight left Yamato and Himawari utterly terrified. The giant Buddha shook the coaches in which people were still alive and screaming for help. With a violent jolt, the coaches collided with one another and were crushed, killing everyone inside as blood began to pour out from them. The Buddha then stabbed the wrecked coaches into the ground and silently observed the blood flowing out. Yamato wondered what was wrong with the creature. At the very least, Ragaraja had not found them yet, and he thought it would be far better if they stayed hidden and waited for Jiro and the others to arrive. However, despite knowing this, he summoned his spear. Himawari was shocked and told him that they needed to wait until the others showed up. Yamato replied that they had come all that way to defeat Ragaraja. In response, Himawari said that Yamato should be aware by now that the Buddha was entirely different from the others, as it was far more dangerous. Yamato trembled with anger and declared that he had to avenge Michiru, insisting that the Buddha was responsible and that he would never forgive it. Himawari then said that he understood what Yamato was feeling, but he emphasized that they needed to wait for the others and avenge Michiru together, no matter what. Suddenly, the Buddha appeared behind Himawari, leaving Yamato completely stunned. Without warning, it swung a giant iron ball attached to a chain and struck him, sending him flying some distance away from Yamato. He was shocked and wondered how Ragaraja had appeared there, as it had supposedly been far away. Ragaraja then struck a strange pose in front of Himawari before unleashing multiple chained iron balls at him in rapid succession. Yamato shouted for it to stop and launched an attack with his spear at Ragaraja, but the creature effortlessly dodged the strike due to its incredible speed. Moments later, one of the iron balls came hurtling toward Yamato. Though drenched in sweat, he somehow managed to dodge the attack. As he steadied himself, he thought in anger that Ragaraja had now killed Himawari just as it had killed Michiru, and he swore that he would never forgive it. He reminded himself that Jiro and the others would arrive soon, and when they did, a full battle would most likely begin. Until then, he resolved to survive no matter what. Yamato was then stunned to discover that there was more than one Ragaraja. He realized that the numerous Amitabhas running around everywhere were merely F-rank entities, while Ragaraja itself was an A-rank being. He questioned why he had assumed there was only one Ragaraja in the first place. All of a sudden, his gaze fell upon one of the damaged coaches, and to his horror, he saw that Kakeru had been captured inside it. The sight left him utterly shocked. Yamato was confused, wondering why Kakeru was there. She had already noticed him and was calling out his name. He knew that he would not be able to do anything while remaining outside, but if he did nothing, Kakeru would be killed as well. Yamato was already engaged in battle with one of the Ragarajas. As he suffered injuries during the fight, he desperately wondered how he could save her, knowing that in his current condition he might be killed too. Meanwhile, the other Ragaraja began crushing the coach, ensuring that Kakeru would be struck and smashed inside it. Struggling both physically and mentally, Yamato considered charging forward recklessly. Suddenly, rage surged within him as he searched for any possible way to help Kakeru escape. Using his sharp instincts, he hurled his spear in such a way that it collided with one of the iron balls of Ragaraja. He poured all of his remaining power into the attack, though the effort nearly overwhelmed him. Somehow, he managed to shatter the iron ball. However, several others immediately came hurtling toward him. Yamato quickly retreated, thinking that he was safe for the moment and that he now had to focus on rescuing Kakeru. But as he ran, one of Ragaraja's iron balls struck him violently, sending him crashing near the other creature. Once again, he was hit, and the crushing pressure from the attack also intensified the force being applied to the coach where Kakeru was trapped. Despite his severe injuries, Yamato forced himself to stand and called out Kakeru's name. He apologized to her, but before he could say anything more, he was struck yet again and collapsed onto the ground. As he lay there, barely conscious, he suddenly noticed something unexpected. One Ragaraja had attacked the other. The two creatures began fighting each other fiercely while Kakeru continued struggling inside the coach. Yamato was bewildered by the sudden turn of events. In the chaos, the coach was on the verge of being crushed completely as both Ragarajas stood opposing each other. He tried desperately to rise and save Kakeru, but his body refused to move. Just as the coach was about to fall, a massive blast erupted nearby. Yamato initially thought that another train had exploded and was confused about what had happened. Then he saw that the others had arrived. Jiru appeared and urged them not to let the opportunity slip away, declaring that they would take down both Ragarajas at once. Yamato felt a wave of relief as he realized that the others had finally arrived. However, he soon noticed that they had come from a different train than the one in which Kakeru had been trapped. Kazuki instructed everyone to remain focused, while Yuminori urged them to attack with everything they had. Without hesitation, they launched a coordinated assault on both of the Buddhas. Amid the chaos, Yamato's attention shifted back to the coach where Kakeru had been earlier. One of the damaged coaches fell near him, and he quickly made his way toward it to check on her condition. Upon reaching her, he saw that she was injured, though not fatally. Meanwhile, Yuminori, along with the others, relentlessly attacked one of the Ragarajas. Despite landing several powerful blows, they suddenly realized that the creature had not suffered any visible damage. Jiro then declared that they should focus on eliminating one Ragaraja while he handled the other alone. He warned them not to expect his support and told them to fight with the clear intention of killing it. As the battle intensified, Yamato carried Kakeru away to a safer location, anxiously asking whether she was all right. She told him that her entire body was in pain. Concerned, Yamato wondered how she had ended up inside the train coach in the first place. Kakeru explained that they had been taken completely by surprise. A metal ball had descended from above, and before she could react, she had suddenly found herself trapped inside the coach. She assumed the same had happened to the others, as everything had occurred far too quickly. On the battlefield, the others continued to struggle. Even though they were attacking Ragaraja repeatedly, their blows did not leave so much as a scratch on its body. To make matters worse, they could barely even manage to land a proper hit on it due to its overwhelming speed and strength. As the giant iron balls came crashing toward them, Yuminori rushed forward and punched one aside, saving Ren at the last second. Ren was terrified at the sight of the monstrous Buddha standing before him and began to run in panic. Just as the creature prepared to attack him, Kazuki quickly lifted Ren out of harm's way. At the same time, Yuminori repeatedly struck the Buddha's leg, attempting to bring it down. On the other side of the battlefield, Jiru managed to sever one of the arms of the other Ragaraja. However, even as he fought fiercely, he realized that he had only succeeded in cutting off a single arm despite going nearly all out. He understood that their expectations had been far too optimistic. Glancing at the others, he saw that they were already close to being annihilated. He had not anticipated that the gap in power would be this wide. It seemed that fate could not be changed so easily. At that moment, his gaze shifted toward Yamato and Yuto. Jiru approached Yuto and told him that he would hold both Ragarajas off for a while, hoping that Yuto understood what he was implying. As they quickly discussed the situation, Yamato overheard Yuto calling out to Yuminori, Ren, and Kazuki. Yuto then hurried toward Yamato and Karen, urging Yamato to take her and leave immediately. Yamato was confused and demanded to know what Yuto was saying. Yuto insisted that he hurry and escape. Yamato shouted that he would not run away while Yuminori and the others were dying. In frustration, he pushed Yuto aside, questioning how they could possibly be the only ones to flee. Yuto, angered, retorted that Yamato was being an idiot. He argued that precisely because everyone else was being killed, Yamato had to survive and escape. Yuto reminded him that Yamato was the only one capable of changing the future with the time travel bracelet, and that he must not die. He added that this was not the first time Yamato had heard this truth. Though Yamato understood, he pointed out that Jiru was still fighting alone and insisted on going back to help him. Yuto revealed that Jiru was deliberately holding the Buddhas off to give Yamato a chance to escape. He explained that Jiru was years ahead of them in power, skill, and experience, and had personally ordered Yamato to run. Moreover, Yamato's ability had only recently awakened. If he stayed behind, he would be nothing more than a burden. Yamato was visibly furious. Yuto then turned to Kakeru and told her that he was leaving Yamato in her care. As startled, Yamato demanded to know what Yuto meant and whether he was not coming back. Yuto calmly replied that he would remain behind to buy more time for them. Glancing toward Jiru's battle, he remarked that Jiru was truly extraordinary but likely would not last much longer, which meant he had to step in. Yamato shouted at him to stop talking nonsense. However, Yuto calmly responded that he intended to do the same as Shinji. He then told Yamato to make sure he did not die, adding that if Yamato were to die, Michiru would be furious with him. Jiru had been struggling intensely against his opponents and was already heavily injured. He felt as though this was the end for him. Just then, Yuto arrived and declared that he would buy some time for Jiru and would be the one to protect Yamato. Jiru watched as Yuto went alone to face the two enemies. Yamato also attempted to rush into the battle, but Kakeru stopped him and insisted that they leave immediately. Yamato shouted at her to just leave him alone. Yet Yuto activated his power thinking about the so-called odd genius and resolved to keep fighting until Yamato escaped. He hurled his spear in a powerful strike toward the massive spheres attacking them, but the assault did not last long. Soon after, he was struck by another sphere. He realized that the burden was too much for him to handle alone. Meanwhile, Kakeru shouted at Yamato that fighting did not require courage. What he truly needed was the courage to escape and the determination to survive on his own. She mentioned that her sister's diary had once stated that in a certain story, only the protagonist survived, while all his companions perished in the subway. Yamato wondered if that meant Kakeru and Yuto would also die. Kakeru responded that even if that were the case, Yamato would have to endure the pain, grit his teeth, and survive, no matter the grief. Yuto grabbed his spear and soared into the sky, dodging Buddha's attack. Jira observed that using the odd genius as a means of transportation was a highly convenient tactic. With the large iron spears in motion, the battlefield began to resemble a chaotic football match as the weapons flew while tracking their opponents. Yuto leapt over Buddha and counterattacked. Jira thought that Yuto was incredibly resilient and seemed determined to crush his enemy from within. Yuto struck Buddha on the head, wondering how much damage he had inflicted. However, Buddha merely glared at both Yamato and Yuto before striking Yuto with one hand and slamming him into the ground. Though severely injured, Yuto forced himself to stand. He admitted to himself that he had thought his plan would succeed, but it had failed. Still, he held onto one unwavering resolve: to protect Yamato, as he had sworn to Michiru. He felt the urge to apologize to both of them. Although the three of them had spent almost all their time together, he had always loved Michiru. Since childhood, her happiness had been his own. That was why he had once believed that even if she did not choose him, he would accept it as long as she was happy with the person she loved. However, before her death, she had confessed that she truly loved Yamato. At that moment, Yuto had felt as if his body were being torn apart by grief. Even now, amid the battle, he felt a trace of jealousy toward Yamato and wondered whether, if the future had changed, the two of them would have ended up together. Yet despite everything, what he cherished most was seeing them both smile. Therefore, to change the future, he resolved that he would die there. As he sensed another attack approaching, he realized he was about to collapse before it could even strike him. But at that moment, Yamato rushed in, wielded his spear, and shouted, asking whether Yuto was all right. Yuto wondered why Yamato had come back. The giant spheres struck the area with devastating force, shaking the battlefield. The scene reminded Yamato of what had happened moments earlier, when Kakeru had been pulling him away. He had resisted her desperately and eventually freed himself, shouting for her to stop because he could not abandon everyone and run. Kakeru had asked whether he understood that if he returned to the battlefield, Yuto's sacrifice would become meaningless. She had insisted that escaping was the best option for him and that he needed to reflect on why he was still alive. She had reminded him that his survival was only because of Yuto and her sister. And because he had once vowed to change the future, Yamato had recalled a memory from the past, when he had defeated Yuto in a soccer match and teasingly told him not to underestimate a brother who had been born 5 minutes earlier. The memory faded, and the present returned. Yamato stood on the battlefield once again, facing the two Buddhas blocking his path. Jiru angrily called him an idiot and demanded to know why he had come back after being clearly told to run away. At that moment, Yamato heard a faint sound in the distance and discovered that Yuminori was still alive. Yuminori urged him to hurry and leave, adding that a coward like him would only become a burden. Yamato looked at everyone, his emotions boiling over. He apologized and admitted that he might survive if he ran, but he felt deep down that doing so would not be the right choice. The others were shocked. Yamato then told Jiru that he had begun to understand, even if only slightly, why Jiru had failed to change the future. Suddenly, the two Buddhas launched their attack toward him. Yamato remembered the story from the diary, the one in which only the protagonist survived while the others died in the subway. Realizing this, he activated his power, acknowledging that changing the future would not be a simple task. He struggled to dodge the Buddha's relentless attacks. From a distance, Misra watched in confusion, wondering why Yamato had not chosen to escape, as it seemed entirely irrational. She recalled how moments earlier Yamato had apologized and declared that he had to return to the fight. She had shouted at him, asking why, and insisted that running away was not something to be ashamed of. It could even be admirable. If he truly wished to change the future, why would he throw away such a precious opportunity? Yamato had responded that it was not like that. In fact, it was the opposite. He had questioned what meaning there would be in surviving alone, if he were to live by hiding from the Buddhas, gathering information, and only fighting battles he was certain he could win. Could that truly be called changing the future? Yamato forced himself to stop dwelling on those memories. As he ran forward, a massive sphere crashed into the ground near him, shaking the earth beneath his feet. He reflected that changing the future was far more difficult than simply declaring it. Jiru had once explained that many of his comrades had fought against the Buddhas before only to be slaughtered. They had been completely powerless against the A and S rank Buddhas, and in the end, survival had always been the only priority. According to Jiru, that reality could not be changed. Yet, somehow, Yamato felt that accepting such a conclusion was wrong. He believed there was no need to restrain himself anymore, no reason to hold back. Suddenly, he leapt over a broken wall, rage surging through him. He told himself that even if the future he sought was nothing more than a fragile, barely visible thread, he would pursue it in the wildest way possible. Using a chain for leverage, he launched himself into the air and landed between the two Buddhas, shocking everyone who witnessed it. The two Buddhas attacked him simultaneously. Yuto was stunned, unable to comprehend why Yamato would recklessly place himself between them. In that critical moment, Yamato used his odd genius to strike himself and propel his body aside, believing that there was no option left except to turn the impossible into reality. As Yamato was forcefully pushed away, the massive spheres launched by the Buddhas collided with one another instead. The battlefield fell silent in astonishment. Everyone was amazed by Yamato's tactic, and even Yuto stared in disbelief. Yamato crashed onto the ground at a distance, groaning that his arm hurt terribly. As he assessed himself, he realized that Ragarajas seemed to have no effect. Instead of discouraging him, the realization only fueled his determination. He resolved that even if he were to collapse, he would continue struggling, rise again, and shout that he would change the miserable future they were trapped in. He swore that he would restore the world to the days when happiness still existed. Yamato then used his odd genius to launch himself toward one of the massive spheres and strike it directly. In the same instant, one of Mon's hands and one of the Buddha's arms as well were severed by the force of the attack. Jiru was left in confusion at the sudden turn of events. However, he, along with Yuminori and Yuto, rushed forward to join the fight. They acknowledged that their preparations had undoubtedly been insufficient, but despite that, they chose to stand and battle together. They all got ready, and Yamato suggested that they should defeat the Ragaraja. They engaged in battle, and as they fought, Yamato reflected that ever since the world had changed, he had understood only one thing. During the fight, they finally managed to push one of the Ragaraja into a hole. Jiro then urged the others to take down the remaining one before it could call for backup. Yuto, using his peculiar genius, confused the Ragaraja with its own spheres, and Yamato thought that Yuto truly was someone extraordinary. Meanwhile, Yuminori landed a powerful punch on the Ragaraja's leg, causing it to collapse. He declared that faith could move even mountains. They twisted the creature brutally, but soon Yamato noticed that the spheres were coming toward them to attack. However, Kazuki and Rin, who were still alive, suddenly intervened and stopped the attack. Himawari was also helping them. Himawari told Yamato that he should finish them all, as it would serve as his revenge. Yamato pretended not to react, But soon they saw Jiro decapitate one of the Ragaraja and realized that its defense was surprisingly shallow. Yamato reflected that after the world had changed, he had believed that mundane life, common scenery, and living simply because one had to would never truly change. However, he realized that he had been completely wrong. Their world was fragile and could crumble due to an unexpected event. Whether it be war, a natural disaster, or perhaps even the will of a god who truly existed. Within just 5 minutes, Yamato had decided to turn his back on humanity. Yamato wondered how he could gather power in his hands. He resolved that he would live every single moment of his life to the fullest, make his own decisions, ensure that he would never regret them, and walk the path he believed was right with everything he had. With that determination, Yamato delivered a powerful slash to the Ragaraja, and everyone was stunned to see it collapse right in front of them. They were overwhelmed with joy that they had finally defeated one of those creatures. However, Yamato asked where the other one had gone. Jiro said that he felt something unusual, while Yuto wondered whether it was finally over for the day. They then decided to take a look inside the hole. Fortunately, there was a canal right beneath it, and the other Ragaraja had been swept away by the current. Yamato and the others realized that they had survived. Exhausted from the battle, they allowed themselves to relax for a while. After that, Yamato went to help Himawari free himself and asked if he was all right. He told him to be more careful next time and explained that, as a last resort, he had dug a hole and hidden beneath a bed of Yuminoris. He admitted that he had been truly fortunate to survive. Kakeru was observing the town and remarked that it was truly surprising that they had managed to overcome such strange events. She recalled her sister's diary, which had stated that everyone except the protagonist had died. However, Yamato had changed the future himself. In a situation where they were supposed to escape, Yamato had chosen not to run, but to fight instead. And everything that had happened was possible only because he had been there. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a Ragaraja and turned around, wondering whether it had somehow come back to life. Jiro stated that it was impossible, explaining that its neck had already been torn off and that it had died on its own. However, the face of the Ragaraja declared that it would extinguish the human race. Everyone was shocked and wondered whether the Buddha had suddenly stopped. Yuto thought that perhaps the GAG had malfunctioned, and that everything had ended because of it. The Buddha began speaking in a strange language, which left them even more stunned. Suddenly it screamed, causing Yamato to panic and stumble. Jiro asked Yamato whether he and Himawari were all right. After they confirmed that they were fine, Yuto questioned what was happening with the Buddha. He wondered whether they were all simply waiting for death, where these creatures had come from, and what their true objective was. Yamato quietly questioned whether they had truly changed the future. Himawari told him not to worry, and assured him that they would surely be able to change it. Yuminori, however, wondered how much they had actually altered. He reflected that Marita had died and that they were completely exhausted from fighting. If the outcome was destined to remain the same, he questioned what the meaning of their struggle had been. Jiro approached the Buddha's body and remarked that he had not known that Buddhas were capable of speaking. He suggested that they should remove its shackles. However, once they unintentionally removed the E-rank Buddha's restraints, it transformed into a brutal killing machine before they could react. From that moment on, they established a strict rule regarding the Buddhas. Jiro realized that high-ranking Buddhas possessed elevated intelligence and carried immense malice within them. He explained that Jiro Code had spent more than 20 years creating the odd genius. Yet by the time he succeeded, only a few of his companions had survived, only to be killed by Buddhas shortly afterward. In the end, they had never managed to defeat a single A-rank Buddha. He stated that the information they now possessed was the result of countless sacrifices and told Yamato that he should take pride in that. Jiro then urged everyone to follow him, explaining that it would be dangerous to remain there while injured. They eventually returned to the clockwork shelter to rest. Meanwhile, Kakeru was taking a bath and commented that it was amazing that the place still had running water and electricity. Suddenly, Kazuki entered and explained that the water had been collected from rain, and as for the electricity, they had their own power generator. Kakeru was startled to see Kazuki inside. Kazuki clung to her and suggested that they should shower together to avoid wasting water. She touched Kakeru's skin and remarked that it was glossy and beautiful, admiring how well Kakeru took care of herself despite her young age. She also noticed a mole on her body. Kakeru felt extremely uncomfortable and wondered where exactly Kazuki was touching. Kakeru felt uncomfortable as she thought about how tall and well-built Kazuki was. She reflected that perhaps she herself would look like that once she became an adult. While they were bathing, Kazuki brought up Kakeru's prediction and said that she was relieved it had turned out to be wrong. She mentioned that the prediction had claimed everyone except Yamato would die. She questioned whether that meant the contents of the book were merely similar to their world but had no real connection to it. Kakeru agreed, saying that it did seem that way and admitted that she would be happy if that were truly the case. Meanwhile, in the hall, Everyone was being treated and resting. Yamato shouted at Yuto, telling him to be more gentle while treating the wounds. Himawari, lying nearby, remarked that he wished he could drink some alcohol. After the treatment was finished, Yamato and Yuto began reading the book together. Yuto asked whether Yamato had found the diary Kakeru had mentioned. Yamato replied that he had not been able to find it and added that the notes he had seen were not written in as much detail as he had expected. Mijiru and Yamato recalled that Kakeru had once said one of the books she had read was identical to their current world. Yamato wondered just how similar it truly was. At that moment, Kakeru entered the room. When she noticed the date, June 7th, 2013, she quickly grabbed the book. Yuto asked what had happened. Kakeru explained that the page described a world with characters who behaved similarly to them, where everyone except the protagonist eventually died. Kazuki became excited and asked where exactly that had been written. They all checked the book together. As they read through it carefully, Kakeru grew increasingly shocked. Yuto then stated that there was nothing in the text about everyone dying, as she had previously claimed. Instead, the book described how they had narrowly defeated the Buddhas inside the subway and safely returned. Although the account was different from what Kakeru remembered, it was true that Buddhas had appeared in both versions. Yamato began to wonder whether Kakeru had made a mistake. Kazuki responded calmly that there were many books in the world, and it was not strange if one happened to resemble their situation. She added that they should not pay too much attention to it. However, Kakeru was convinced that there was no way she could be mistaken. She was certain that she had once read in the diary that everyone except the protagonist would die. Yet now, the contents of the diary appeared to have changed. She wondered how that could have happened. She questioned what might have caused such a change and whether it was the result of Yamato's actions altering the future. If that hypothesis were true, then the book her sister had read was not an ordinary one but a prophetic book, and that led her to another unsettling question. Who had even written it? On May 22, 2018, Kakeru prepared herself in her room and picked up the book, telling everyone that it was time to get going. Yuminori looked around and remarked that everything seemed to be in order. Meanwhile, Ren suddenly jumped onto Yamato and Yuto, urging them to play games with him. However, they were still heavily injured and asked him to let them rest. Yuto commented that they had practically been through a professional wrestling match the previous day. Ren, however, refused to leave them alone and kept shaking their bodies, telling them not to talk like that and to enjoy their lives instead. He even tugged at their hair, saying that if they had a cell phone, they could all play games together. However, he had previously been told not to waste electricity, so he was reminded again that it was not the time for such things. Kazuki then came over to see what was happening. Himawari remarked that Ren was truly amazing for being able to act so carefree even in such a dire situation. Kazuki replied that it was to be expected since before the world had changed, Ren had not even been allowed to play freely. Yamato and Yuto desperately asked someone to save them. Eventually, Kazuki lifted Ren and carried him away. After that, Yamato approached Himawari and admitted that he had truly thought he might die. Yuto then stood up and asked Yamato whether he had noticed something strange about their injuries. He pointed out that although they had suffered serious wounds the previous day, the pain had already begun to fade after just one day. Yamato moved his body to test it and realized it was true. However, Himawari commented that he still could not move properly. Jiru told them not to be surprised and explained that it was due to the effects of the odd genius as it began to sprout within them. He stated that their physical abilities and recovery capacities would improve significantly, which was to be expected from the Buddha cells. Everyone fell silent upon hearing that. Yamato then asked whether the injection Jiru had given them for cultivation was something different from what they had thought. Jiru calmly revealed that it was a drug extracted from the Buddhas. Hearing that, they all screamed in shock. Jiru continued by explaining that around 2 years in the future, while he had been fleeing from the Buddhas, he had stumbled upon a small laboratory hidden inside a shed. There, he had discovered stored research data. Based on that information, he had begun experimenting to find a method to oppose the Buddhas. He explained that he had first conducted several experiments using the corpses of Buddhas. As a result, he discovered that by injecting a drug called OW54, created from Buddha stem cells, into a human body, the subject would undergo a mutation. He added that they likely would not fully understand what he was about to tell them. After saying that, he casually began drinking. The others immediately shouted, asking whether he was joking and whether that was truly what he had injected into all of them. Yuto approached Jiru and asked whether Buddhas were actually living creatures. Jiru confirmed that they were. He further explained that the odd genius and their enhanced recovery abilities had originated from Buddha cells. However, he admitted that even he did not completely understand what they were becoming or what consequences might follow. He added that what they were experiencing now was only the beginning. and there were still many things they did not yet know. After some time, Yuminori approached Yamato and told him that it was now his turn to go on patrol. Yamato agreed and left. But as he walked, he looked at the concept of the odd genius and wondered whether it was truly safe to use something created from Buddhas. Suddenly, Yamato noticed Kakeru approaching with a backpack. He was shocked and wondered whether she was planning to leave alone. He stopped her, but she told him to follow her instead. Confused, Yamato asked where she wanted him to go. Kakeru then showed him Michiru's diary and pointed to the part where it stated that everyone except the protagonist had died inside the subway. She insisted that she was certain it had been written there. Yamato replied that no such statement existed in the diary now. Kakeru responded that, in other words, the original contents of the book had changed. Yamato asked what she meant by that. Kakeru admitted that she was not entirely sure about the details, but she was convinced that the author of the book had chosen Yamato as its protagonist. Hearing that, Yamato grew even more confused. He wondered whether she was implying that the person who had written the book was either himself, Jiru, or perhaps another time traveler they were not even aware of. Kakeru explained that she had thought about it all night and concluded that the theory did not make sense. She reasoned that they could only travel back once, whereas the author of the book had written and rewritten events, which meant that the author must have gone back in time at least twice. She further stated that such a feat was not something someone in Yamato's or Jiro's position would be capable of accomplishing. Therefore, she concluded that the author of the book was someone beyond their scope, an external existence. Yamato was stunned by her words. Suddenly, he remembered the mysterious person who had given him the bracelet. Kakeru added that there were still many things they did not understand. That was precisely why she wanted to investigate the matter properly. Not through the diary, but through the book itself. She explained that this was why she had asked Yamato to accompany her to the library. After some time, they noticed a plane crashing nearby. Around it stood Buddha statues, and a strange person was observing the scene. Yamato immediately told Kakeru to stay where she was, saying that he would go and call the others. However, Kakeru was left in shock as the book slipped from her hands. She had just read that an emergency plane landing would occur and that in the ensuing accident, everyone would die except for Yamato. There were many people on the plane. A young girl began to panic and a woman told her to calm down, assuring her that she would protect her no matter what. She promised that she would use everything she had to keep her safe. The passengers were informed that due to fuel exhaustion, the aircraft could no longer maintain flight and would attempt an emergency landing on the highway. They were instructed to fasten their seatbelts tightly and prepare for evacuation. The captain also told the air hostesses to follow the same safety procedures. The president was also on board and wondered about the so-called Buddhas. He had fled from Russia to Japan, believing it would be safer there. Meanwhile, a man with a camera tried to connect to the Japanese internet. He eventually managed to record a shocking and impactful video and thought about uploading it. Another man noticed a boy who was frightened and clinging to his mother. He wondered if the boy was Yuria, the gold medalist. He thought that if they landed safely, he would like to shake hands with him. A woman shouted at the man, questioning why he was talking about such things at a critical moment. The man replied that she was being unreasonable and insisted that it had to be said now, as he had been Yuria's fan since the first time he saw him on television. He then mentioned the ice fairy, explaining that Yuria's performances were always beautiful and that his scores were consistently high. He added that he had been deeply moved the first time he saw him and that Yuria seemed practically like an angel. Eventually, the plane began its landing on the highway. As it descended, it shook violently, terrifying everyone on board. Somehow, they managed to land safely, but the real danger was just beginning. The captain instructed everyone to listen carefully. He explained that once the emergency exit doors were opened, evacuation slides would deploy. And he urged the passengers to focus on surviving. As the passengers began evacuating, a large man looked at a boy and a girl and remarked that they seemed close. He wondered if they were dating. The two blushed and clarified that he was mistaken, explaining that they had only recently started getting along. The man nodded in understanding and told them that they could not afford to hide. He encouraged them to have confidence in their fighting skills and step forward. He then asked everyone to clear the way, stating that he and a few others would stand at the front and that the rest should follow behind them. He confidently declared that although he might not look like it, he came from a family of mixed martial artists. Finally, as the gate opened, he shouted at the Buddhas not to underestimate humans. As soon as the passengers exited the plane, they were immediately killed by the Buddhas. Terrified, everyone tried to flee in different directions in an attempt to save their lives, but they were all slaughtered. The president's assistant urged him to wait, but the president ignored him and ran away. Meanwhile, the boy and the girl hid somewhere nearby, whispering that there were too many Buddhas outside and that they should remain hidden for a while. The boy reassured her not to worry, promising that he would protect her no matter what. They both wondered what the Buddhas were doing there. After that, The Buddhas began piling up the corpses, arranging their faces into grotesque and exaggerated expressions, some frozen in tears and fear. The boy watched in shock as the Buddhas toyed with the faces of the dead. Suddenly, his own face was torn apart, leaving the girl horrified. Moments later, she too was killed. The cameraman remained hidden, continuing to record everything. He remarked to himself that it was truly tragic, but also that he had managed to capture remarkably clear footage. He thought people would not get bored of it, and that it might even surpass 1 million views. He realized he could no longer remain calm. He then noticed a man harassing a woman. The man was saying that it did not matter anymore since they could not escape, and that at least they should create pleasant final memories before dying. However, before he could do anything further, a Buddha grabbed his head and tore it apart in front of the woman's eyes. The cameraman continued recording, commenting internally that he was capturing the public slaughter of the world-famous ice skater. He thought the footage was extraordinary and that it would earn him 100 million views. He imagined that from that day onward, he would become the top YouTuber. In truth, however, he genuinely admired Yuria. Suddenly, one Buddha turned its attention toward the reporter while another approached the girl. The reporter was completely shocked. At that moment, the girl and the others noticed that Yamato had arrived with his group. Yamato stated that there were many Buddhas present and instructed his companions to immediately check the area for any survivors. The scene shifted to the clockwork, where Kakeru was sitting while Himawari was lying down beside her. Himawari asked Kakeru not to move too much, explaining that Yamato had been worried about her condition and had made her stay there to rest. Yamato then wondered about the backpack, and Kakeru replied that it was a very sturdy one. The scene shifted back to the battlefield, where Yamato was fighting relentlessly, defeating one Buddha after another while rescuing the remaining survivors. A girl watched in shock as humans fought against the monstrous Buddhas. Suddenly, one of the monsters lunged toward her, but Yuto stepped in front of her just in time, saving her from the attack. He praised her for surviving until that moment. Ren and Kazuki were also present. Ren asked about the number of survivors around Yamato, and it was reported that only a few had been found. Yamato then instructed everyone to retreat from the area. Yuto grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her along as they began to withdraw. As Ren and Yamato ran together, they noticed that numerous Buddhas were chasing them. Ren pointed out that they were running in the opposite direction of the clockwork. Yamato responded that there was no chance of turning back now. Suddenly, they encountered a man who said that the situation was truly terrifying. He gestured urgently with his hand, signaling them to come toward a particular direction. Ren wondered whether he might be another survivor from the plane. Jiru instructed Yamato and Yuto to take care of the other passers-by. Yamato then told Yuto to head to the left, while he would handle the right side. They both moved swiftly and destroyed the pillars of the bridge, causing it to collapse. This delayed the advancing Buddhas and bought them some time to escape. Jiru thought to himself that Yamato was performing exceptionally well. However, as the Buddhas forced their way across the ruined bridge, they discovered that Yamato and the others had already fled. The group arrived at a house, and it was suggested that the path ahead would be narrow, making it unlikely for them to encounter the Buddhas there. Once inside, the man who had led them there expressed his surprise. He remarked that he had not expected them to defeat the Buddhas, and wondered what the spears they were using actually were. Jiro questioned whether the man had truly been a passenger on the plane. The man clarified that he was not from the flight, but was someone who had been hiding and living alone in the area. He explained that he had seen the plane and decided to check the situation. Rajan was surprised to learn that there were other survivors in the area besides Yamato's group. The man trembled as he admitted that he had been extremely frightened. Given the circumstances, he had hoped to find companions, and he also stated that he wanted information about what was happening in other places. At some distance, they heard the girl from the plane crying. Yuto approached her with a flower and explained that, in the language of flowers, it symbolized true love. He encouraged her to stay strong, reminding her that she was still alive and that her mother would surely be happy about that. The girl thanked him softly and expressed her gratitude. Yamato looked at the flowers growing outside and wondered whether signs of what was happening elsewhere could also be found there. He noticed that the flowers continued to bloom despite the presence of the Buddhas. He also observed that birds were still able to fly freely. This led him to consider the possibility that humans might be the only species whose world had been turned upside down by the Buddhas. The man who had brought them there then mentioned that he had picked up a camera near the plane. Everyone became curious, and Kazuki wondered whether it was still functional. The man admitted that he did not know much about it, but said he could at least turn it on. He suggested that they might be able to learn about the situation outside through the footage. Yuto then asked the girl where the airplane had originated. She replied that it had come from Moscow, departing from Sheremetyevo International Airport. Upon reviewing the camera, the man discovered that the footage contained information related to Russia. The man checked the footage and stated that Russia had also been invaded by the Buddhas. They then came across a recording showing a Buddha emerging from a lake. From that, Yamato and Yuto realized where the Buddhas were coming from. They concluded that it was safe to assume the entire world was under attack. Jiro added that a Buddha similar to the one in the footage had been seen near their current location. The man glanced outside and observed that it was getting dark. He suggested that they should rest there for the night, explaining that traveling after dark would be extremely dangerous. Jiro agreed with the suggestion, and the group decided to rest as best as they could. Later that night, a strange man appeared holding a syringe and quietly approached Yamato. However, Jiro stopped him and demanded to know what he was trying to do with the injection, pointing out that he was behaving suspiciously. After a while, everyone heard a sound and got up wondering what was happening. They discovered that the person from earlier was being held at the edge of Jiru's sharp weapon. Jiru demanded that he explain what plan he had involving Yamato and the syringe. Everyone was confused, and the man told them to relax, saying that it was a misunderstanding. He explained that he always carried a syringe with him due to his chronic illness. However, Jiru suddenly destroyed the syringe and questioned why it was not empty, accusing him of putting on a useless act and wondering who he truly was. The man observed Jiro's strange genius power and remarked that it was truly splendid. Suddenly, Yamato began to feel something unusual. He sensed a strong odor, like that of countless rotting creatures coming from the man. It was the first time Yamato had ever smelled something like that, and he silently questioned the strange sensation. The man then stated that it was a shame he had come so close, yet failed to obtain some of Yamato's blood to analyze what those unusual elements were. He introduced himself as Asuma, a scientific investigator specializing in molecular biology. He added that his interest in the Buddhas was insatiable, and that they were equally fascinating to him at that moment. Jiru was shocked to hear this. Asuma continued by saying that they were truly outstanding. He revealed that he had observed everything that had happened during the plane crash, and that, although their special abilities were fascinating, the way they had handled the situation was even more impressive. For that reason, he invited them to his laboratory and asked them to tell him everything they knew about their abilities and the Buddhas. Kazuki hesitated, wondering if Asuma might be a dangerous person, while Ren felt frightened upon hearing about the laboratory. Jiru then stated that he at least wanted to ask Asuma one question regarding the small underground building located half an hour's walk toward Igabukuro. Everyone was shocked, and Asuma asked Jiru for his name. After Jiru introduced himself, Asuma mentioned that he had no information about him, which he found very interesting. Yamato asked Jiru whether he knew Asuma, but Yuto commented that it was obvious Jiru would not know him. However, Jiru replied that he had mentioned the odd genius to them the previous day, and that the reports he had found in the laboratory in the future were written by an author named Asuma. Everyone was stunned to realize that this was the same Asuma. Jiru further stated that Asuma had already died in the future, and that he had believed Asuma to be the scientist who wrote the foundation with whom he had worked to create the odd genius. Asuma then remarked that, based on their reactions, they had already been to the laboratory. Yamato urged Jiru not to follow Asuma's suggestion, explaining that he felt nauseated by the stench coming from him. Nevertheless, Jiru insisted that they should proceed, stating that Asuma's head could be useful to them. Yuto pointed out that if Yamato believed Asuma was suspicious, then they should not comply with him. Suddenly, the door opened on its own, shocking everyone. They heard sounds coming from inside and were confused about what it could be. Yuto mentioned that he did not think Buddhas could appear in such a narrow area so easily, and suggested that it might be someone from the house. However, when they looked outside, they saw small Buddhas approaching them. Kazuki witnessed everything, and all of them were confused about how the Buddhas had managed to find them. Yamato realized that one of the Buddhas approaching them was the same one that had previously attacked Shinji. He told everyone that they should break the window with a brush and escape through it. However, before they could do so, they noticed that Buddhas were also entering through the windows. With no other choice, they attempted to escape through the kitchen, with Yamato guiding and protecting them as they ran. While they were fleeing, Ren commented that the Buddhas had found them incredibly quickly. Meanwhile, Asuma urged them to proceed to his laboratory. Yuminori then asked Yamato whether he was seriously planning to follow Asuma. Suddenly, they were forced to stop because Buddhas were advancing from ahead as well. Kazuki remarked that they were extremely unlucky, as no matter which direction they tried to take, Buddhas kept approaching them from every side. This left them deeply worried, and eventually they found themselves trapped on a bridge, completely surrounded by Buddhas. Yuto stated that their overconfidence might have been the problem, and added that it seemed as though the Buddhas somehow knew their location at all times. Yamato began to wonder about that possibility, and then he noticed something unusual about Asuma. He asked what Asuma was holding. Yuto appeared confused, but Yamato moved closer to check, as he had already sensed a strange smell coming from Asuma's clothes. They soon discovered that Asuma was carrying a Buddha's finger. Yamato questioned whether Asuma had taken it from the plane crash incident and speculated that the Buddhas might have been tracking them because of it. He immediately shouted at Asuma, demanding that he throw it away at once. However, Asuma refused to do so. Asuma declared that he would not hand over the finger to anyone and asked them to listen to him. He explained that before their encounter, no one had ever defeated a single Buddha, and therefore the finger was an extremely valuable research sample. He insisted that he could not throw it away under any circumstances. Yamato grew visibly furious and shouted that it was because of that finger that they had been surrounded by the Buddhas. The Buddhas were drawing dangerously close, and the group struggled desperately to fight them off. Despite the danger, Asuma still refused to discard the finger. Yuto rushed toward Asuma and urged him to throw it away, warning that if they failed to escape, Asuma would certainly die. Asuma, clearly frightened, argued that if he conducted proper research in his laboratory, he would be able to obtain a vast amount of valuable information about the Buddhas. He questioned whether they could achieve such results in any other way. Kazuki grabbed Asuma by the collar and angrily questioned whether he even cared about their situation, pointing out that they were being attacked because of him. She threatened that they would leave him behind as bait. The others were shocked by her reaction. Asuma pleaded with them not to do that and reminded them that they all wanted to learn more about the Buddhas. He insisted that he was telling them it was possible. At that moment, a Buddha moved to attack Ren, but Yuto intervened and saved him. However, one of the Buddha's heads managed to bite Ren on the arm. Amid the chaos, Asuma stepped toward the edge of the bridge as if preparing to jump and told them to give up. They wondered what he was doing. Asuma responded that he was a scientist and that for the sake of his ambition, he would not hesitate to take risks. He then jumped into the river below. They saw that he managed to swim despite claiming that his body felt heavy, and he stated that the Buddhas would not approach the river. It seemed to them that Asuma was safe and had planned his escape. Kazuki remarked that Asuma was incredibly cunning, and while the Buddhas focused on chasing him, the others managed to retreat from the area. Asuma called out to them, urging them to jump as well. However, he soon noticed that the Buddhas had begun linking themselves together, forming a chain as they moved closer to attack him. Before they could reach him, Yamato used his odd genius ability to create a path and pull Asuma to safety. Everyone was stunned. Yamato told Asuma that he had better make good use of the finger and ensure that the investigation progressed. After Asuma agreed, Yamato instructed the group to head to the laboratory using their odd genius abilities. Kazuki appeared extremely angry and questioned why Yamato had chosen to save Asuma after everything that had happened. After struggling for a long time, they eventually reached Asuma's laboratory. As they headed downstairs, Yamato remarked that it was only a matter of time before the Buddhas found their location. Asuma told everyone not to rush inside recklessly. Yuto pointed out that if there happened to be more Buddhas below, they would be surrounded instantly. Kazuki responded that she had a simple solution to avoid that situation, suggesting that they could just throw Asuma forward as bait, especially since Ren had nearly lost his life because of him. At last they entered the laboratory, where Asuma formally welcomed them. The place was filled with various experiments and research materials. Yuminori suddenly kicked Asuma, while Yuto told him to stop wasting time and begin his scientific work immediately. Meanwhile, Yamato looked around with visible excitement, fascinated by the laboratory environment. Kazuki noticed a skeleton nearby and wondered whether it belonged to a human corpse. In response, Asuma explained that he was still uncertain about certain details, but it appeared that the method of killing used by a Buddha depended on its specific subtype. He stated that he had performed autopsies to determine the cause of death, and in other words, to understand exactly how the victims had been killed. Jiru looked around the laboratory and thought that it was exactly the same place he had seen in the future. As he observed the surroundings, he noticed several photographs along with Kazuki. Kazuki wondered whether Asuma was truly sane and questioned why Yamato had chosen to save someone like him, fearing that rescuing him might turn out to be the greatest mistake of their lives. Yamato called out to Kazuki and explained that he was fully aware of how dangerous Asuma was. However, he stated that they needed to turn the impossible into something possible. For that to happen, they had to help Asuma uncover the truth about the Buddhas so that he could eventually return to the past and change the outcome. Kazuki grew increasingly irritated and questioned the logic behind that reasoning. She pointed at Yamato and warned that he would certainly regret his decision one day. Meanwhile, Asuma informed them that he would need at least half a day to produce the results. Yuto shouted that he should complete the research within 3 or 4 hours. However, Asuma replied that it was impossible because the laboratory equipment was not advanced enough to deliver results that quickly. Yuto angrily asked whether Asuma truly understood the dangerous situation they were currently facing. Jiru then stepped forward and questioned what Asuma meant earlier. He pointed out that they had said no one except them had ever defeated a Buddha, so he wanted to know why there was already a Buddha corpse in the laboratory. Asuma responded that the corpse was actually the starting point of his entire investigation. He explained that he had discovered it by chance approximately 4 or 5 years ago. Yamada was deeply shocked upon hearing this and realized that Asuma had obtained the Buddha corpse several years before the disaster had even occurred.